ट्राइबल कम्युनिटीज़ के लिए अंडरस्टैंड दिस, पॉवर्टी जो है इट इज़ नॉट मियरली कि मतलब इट इज़ लैक ऑफ सर्टन अमाउंट ऑफ मनी से कम मनी, ठीक है, ऐसा नहीं है. इट इज़ लॉस ऑफ लैंड, इट इज़ लॉस ऑफ लाइवलीहुड, इट इज़ लॉस ऑफ देयर आइडेंटिटी, इट इज़ लॉस ऑफ देयर कल्चर, इट इज़ लॉस, मतलब उनका बैकबोन आप ब्रेक कर रहे हो. मेनी ट्राइबल विलेजेस में अगर आप देखोगे दे आर सो रिमोट, स्कूल्स आर फार अवे, नहीं जा पाएंगे, ठीक है, हॉस्पिटल्स आर सो फार अवे, रोड्स आर सो पुअर, इंटरनेट इज काइंड ऑफ वीक, जॉब्स आर लिमिटेड, right? So most of these children end up leaving मतलब school early, and without education वो क्या करेंगे? You know, good employment becomes difficult. Without employment, poverty is going to continue. See, money can buy houses, but can money buy back their memories? ठीक है, can money replace their forest? Okay, and even if the answer is a yes, ठीक है, money भी नहीं मिल रहा है. Mains का मतलब first 5 papers are कि you just should not have a bad paper. The selection essentially happens because of your option. Who is in Labasna every single year? It is the persons who are the toppers in every option. Anthropologists consider land alienation as the biggest tribal problem in modern India. Many families, and they are in dire need. मतलब ये suddenly from a non-cash economy to a cash economy, you need money. ठीक है, आज के लिए मतलब कितने टाइम you used your phone pay और cash? सोचो, चाय चाहिए, ठीक है, cash. ठीक है, phone मतलब of course you're not paying this every day, but everything on a daily basis that you do is money. Today we are going to deal with this tribal India, tribal society, जहाँ पे we are looking at the problems of tribal communities. ठीक है, so we saw the diversity of tribal communities because language में फ़र्क है, looks में फ़र्क है, culture में, मतलब region में, so many of these kind of फ़र्क है. But next thing we'll take a look at is the tribes and castes may be said it is so difficult to differentiate, but still the problem is there are some groups that are doing much worse, and it turns out it is mostly the tribes. As a single category, if you look at it, the groups that are just not doing as well tend to be from the tribal society, and we'll see what are the common kind of problems that we tend to have with the tribal communities. Okay, ठीक है. So imagine like a story. ठीक है, there's a young tribal farmer. Okay, we'll give him the name Ramu. ठीक है, let's say Ramu. Ramu lives inside or not inside the dense forest, but let's say beside the dense forest, because आपको पता है कि मतलब forest में भी access बहुत सारे लोगों का निकाल दिया गया, especially in the last 200 years. But his family has always been living here for many generations. ठीक है, and the forests have been the one that are giving them everything. Okay, you're a tribal person, ठीक है, you're Ramu, right? And what do you need the forest for? आपका food comes from the forest, आपका medicine comes from the forest, आपका fuel के लिए that वो लकड़ी, all those things come from the forest, आपका water comes from the forest, ठीक है, this is your shop, this is your hospital, this is your temple, ठीक है, life is very simple. Okay, whatever the forest can give us, that is all we need. But slowly what is happening is that things are starting to change. ठीक है, first come the outsiders. ठीक है, let's say the first kind of outsiders come in. There'll be a money lender, and a money lender offers let's say an easy loan. ठीक है, Ramu cannot read any kind of documents. ठीक है, hastakshar, sign, anguta, all these kind of things. ठीक है, it just looks like the money lender is a good guy. He says कि forest के बाहर बहुत सारे ऐसे shops and चीज़ें वगैरह मिलेंगे, but आपको सिर्फ कुछ पेपर के कुछ देने हैं या कॉइन के कुछ देने हैं. I am happy to give it to you. एक कागज़ में मुझे कुछ दे दो. ठीक है, it could be money, it could be whatever it is, ठीक है, but then they say कि मतलब 1 टका, 2 टका, 3 टका, 1 महीने के, you get the picture, right? मतलब snowballing interest keeps increasing, and soon, okay, the money lender comes and tells him कि भाई not an issue at all, ठीक है, no worry, वो पेपर जो है ना, वो पेपर में रख लेता हूँ, वो बड़ा वाला पेपर. Okay, what is that? That is your land that you have sort of like given it to me. This is basically called as your land alienation. Now this actually happened across many tribal regions, whether it is Jharkhand, whether it is your Odisha, whether it is your Chhattisgarh, and so on. So then comes another kind of a forest, another kind of a problem. ठीक है, the government has declared, ठीक है, इंडिया में फॉरेस्ट वगैरह के प्रॉब्लम्स है and all of this, like we have to protect our forest. ठीक है, so we are declaring कि there is a protected forest, मतलब wildlife sanctuary, national park. There are different names to it, different labels to it. You will study this in your environment का topic. ठीक है, the intention is government is saying कि conservation. But suddenly what you see is that what is a forest? We start imagining them as it is the flora and fauna, the trees, plants, herbs, whatever you have, and then the kind of animals there, reptiles and mammals and all those kind of. But many families suddenly lose, the forest, because suddenly we thought flora, fauna, and nobody else. Not people. People रहते हैं क्या? What did we see in Jungle Book? ठीक है, Jungle Book में he was living in the forest. ठीक है, but eventually we have this thing in our mind that okay, he comes back to where he belongs. That's not the truth. Have you ever seen these kind of posters? I've seen this. It's बहुत strong है. We are Adivasi. We are the forest. ठीक है. In their mind, it is flora, fauna, and us. It's always been so. ठीक है. We've had traditional access to these forests. This is our home. Okay, but we start seeing it differently. Okay, this is true for all forests, not only in India, by the way. ठीक है. Amazon में अगर आप जाके देखोगे, deep in the hinterlands, there will be some sort of a hamlet living there for मतलब millennia. ठीक है. सो यहाँ पे क्या हुआ, मेनी फैमिली स्टार्ट लूजिंग देयर ट्रेडिशनल एक्सेस टू द फॉरेस्ट बिकॉज नोटिफाइड हो गया वो फॉरेस्ट. सो नाउ फ्रॉम नाउ ऑन यू कैन नॉट टेक एनी काइंड ऑफ बैम्बू का कलेक्शन. अगर पकड़े गए तुम इतना पीटेंगे कि मतलब यू विल नो. ठीक है. एंड नो हनी का गैदरिंग, नो मोर. ठीक है. नो फायरवुड, नीचे रखो उसको. ठीक है. नॉट इवन एक लीफ नहीं लेना चाहिए यहाँ से. नो काइंड ऑफ फॉरेस्ट प्रोड्यूस यू शुड बी एबल टू टेक. So what they have been managing, by like they conserve the forest and they take only some things. ठीक है. That has all, उनका पूरा livelihood जो है, उनका पूरा life जो है, it kind of disappears overnight. Okay, this happened before, and before we had come out with this something called as the Forest Rights Act of 2006, जहाँ पे now you're being given the rights back to you. Okay, उसमें बहुत सारे problems है. We'll study them in detail. But that was actually brought in to restore many of the traditional rights that they used to have, prior to the British coming, वो last 200 years. Then we said कि मतलब वो डेवलपमेंट आ रहा है. ठीक है. डेवलपमेंट. ठीक है. सो डेवलपमेंट का मतलब है कि है इंडिया हैज़ टू ग्रो एंड वी नीड लार्ज डैम्स एंड वी नीड माइंस, वी नीड. सो लार्ज डैम इज कमिंग. ठीक है. समवेयर. ओके. कहीं और से वो डिसाइड कर रहे हैं, दिल्ली से डिसाइड कर रहे हैं, कैपिटल से डिसाइड कर रहे हैं. देयर इज अ न्यू माइन दैट इज कमिंग इन, और परहैप्स अ न्यू काइंड ऑफ इंडस्ट्री. एवरीबडी इज टॉकिंग इन द न्यूज़, राइट? न्यूज़ चैनल में वगैरह, देयर इज डेवलपमेंट दैट इज कमिंग. ठीक है. द नेशन सर्टनली डेवलप्स. ठीक है. बट वन इंपॉर्टेंट क्वेश्चन रिमेन्स, वेयर विल दैट सेम रामू एंड रामू का फैमिली को? ठीक है. माइन आया, डैम आया, ये आया, वो आया. ठीक है. बट there are thousands of Ramus, thousands of tribal families, 8.6% of the population, 8.4, depending upon which part of the country. So many of them, okay, मतलब millions of them, ठीक है, not thousands, like millions is the right word. Millions of tribal families, they were displaced during these kind of projects. Classic examples are there. हमारे NCERTs में या मतलब स्कूल डेज में we had studied this thing. हिराकुड डैम जो आया था, it's such a huge dam, it's a large dam and so on. ठीक है. उसके पीछे बहुत सारे टीयर्स हैं. ठीक है. सरदार सरोवर डैम अभी तो चल रहा है, तो मतलब you probably know कि तरह so many people का livelihood, उनका पूरा life has gone in a different kind of a direction. You know that. ठीक है. बिकॉज है. ठीक है. देर इज कोल माइनिंग. फॉर एग्जाम्पल देर इज अ प्लेस कॉल्ड हसदियो अरंध. ठीक है. वहाँ पे देर इज कोल माइनिंग, एंड सो डेवलपमेंट इज बीइंग ब्रॉट टू पीपल लाइक यू एंड मी बिकॉज वी हैव बिजली राइट नाउ. ठीक है. बट समबडी एल्स का कंप्लीट लाइफ, हाउ देव बीन लिविंग फॉर सो लॉन्ग, हैज कंप्लीटली गॉन. ठीक है. एंड व्हेन एवर यू डिस्प्लेस देम ऑल्सो, ये रिहैबिलिटेशन एक शब्द हम जो यूज़ करते हैं, इट इज़ ऑलवेज इनकम्प्लीट. ठीक है. द बिगेस्ट चैलेंज इज लाइक उनको कैसे हटाएं. हटा दिया, ठीक है, करेंगे, हाँ करेंगे, ये पेपर दो, वो पेपर दो, ये लेके आओ, वो लेके आओ. ठीक है. मतलब बट दे विल बी लिविंग इन दीज काइंड ऑफ शैंटीज. ठीक है. नाउ कम्स अनदर काइंड ऑफ अ चैलेंज. ठीक है. गवर्नमेंट स्कीम्स आर कमिंग इन, एंड गवर्नमेंट स्कीम्स इफ यू स्टडी इट, मतलब इट लुक्स एक्सीलेंट. मतलब कोई प्रॉब्लम हो ही नहीं सकता इंडिया में. ठीक है. स्कूल्स आर गोइंग टू गेट बिल्ट, हॉस्पिटल्स आर बीइंग सैंक्शन. ठीक है. रोड्स आर बीइंग मतलब अप्रूव्ड. बट जनरली इंडिया का प्रॉब्लम क्या है? करप्शन को छोड़ो. ठीक है. इट इज़ द बिगेस्ट प्रॉब्लम फॉर श्योर, विदाउट अ डाउट. ओके. बट इंडिया का प्रॉब्लम है कि इम्प्लीमेंटेशन रिमेन्स वीक. हम कहेंगे ठीक है, अच्छे से रोड ऐसे आएंगे, 100 करोड़ हैज बिन पुट अप. ठीक है. मतलब 10 करोड़ का होगा, 90 करोड़ कहीं और गया. ठीक है. स्कूल लगा दिया, बट वहाँ पे टीचर्स आते नहीं है. ठीक है. टीचर्स लुक एट इट एज कि मतलब पनिश, मुझे क्यों पनिश किया यार. ठीक है. आई वॉज लिविंग नाइसली विथ माई फैमिली. ठीक है. मुझे इस फॉरेस्ट के पास विद दिस पीपल हु आर मतलब क्या एजुकेट करें इनको. यू अंडरस्टैंड ना. डॉक्टर्स बेसिकली लुक एट इट कि मतलब दिस इज अगेन कि मतलब लाइक आई एम लूजिंग माई लाइफ. ठीक है. आई एम सपोज टू बी मतलब इन दिस काइंड ऑफ अ प्लेस विथ ऑल दिस काइंड ऑफ थिंग्स एंड AC काइंड ऑफ रूम्स एंड ऑल दिस. बट नहीं. ठीक है. मुझे डाल दिया गया कि मतलब इन रूरल ट्राइबल काइंड ऑफ पॉकेट्स. ठीक है. इक्विपमेंट नहीं है, ये नहीं है. दे कैन बिकम गॉड्स टू दीज पीपल बिकॉज देव नेवर सीन दीज काइंड ऑफ डॉक्टर्स. बट माइंडसेट डिफरेंट है. ठीक है. एंड वो बेनिफिट्स जो हम कहते हैं मतलब इट स्टार्ट्स ऑफ फर्स्ट डे, मतलब बाय द टाइम इट इज हाफ पे, बट मिड वे मतलब सब कुछ बंद हो जाता है. सो ग्रेट पॉलिसीज ऑन पेपर बट अ लॉट ऑफ फेलियर्स ऑन द ग्राउंड. अनफॉर्चुनेटली दैट इज द चैलेंज दैट यू आर गोइंग टू हैव बिकॉज यू आर गोइंग टू गो इनटू एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन. ये सब एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन का प्रॉब्लम है. वी आर जस्ट आर नॉट एबल टू सॉर्ट ऑफ डिलीवर. ठीक है. विद करप्शन एंड इम्प्लीमेंटेशन इशूज एंड थिंग्स लाइक दिस. एंड वही तो आप लिखते हो. ठीक है. मतलब यू वांट टू बी एन IAS ऑफिसर एंड यू से कि मतलब इम्प्लीमेंटेशन इशूज हुज रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी इज इट. ठीक है. योर फ्यूचर रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटीज इट इज. यू गेट द पिक्चर, राइट? एंड इफ यू सी देयर इज ऑल्सो, so these are all the kind of problems from that came from outside, but there are some problems from the tribal side as well. ठीक है. See, every problem is not of course, created by outsiders. There are some internal challenges also exist because they are kind of different. Many remote villages still depend on traditional farming techniques. ठीक है, so we say कि मतलब why do you need such a big piece of land? ठीक है, इतने में I can grow all of these things. डालो, productivity increase करो, हर्बिसाइड डालो, इंसेक्टिसाइड डालो, पेस्टिसाइड डालो, ये करो वो करो, हाई यील्ड वैरायटी लो, मोनसेंटो लो, ठीक है, मतलब ट्रेडिशनल वैरायटीज़ को छोड़ो, मतलब यू गेट द पिक्चर, राइट. बट प्रोडक्टिविटी को इंक्रीज करो, इनकम को इंक्रीज करो, राइट. बट येस, बिकॉज प्रोडक्टिविटी इज लो, इनकम रिमेन्स अनसर्टेन. ठीक है, एंड मॉडर्न टेक्नोलॉजी जो है इट रीचेस दीज काइंड ऑफ पॉकेट्स वेरी वेरी स्लोली. मतलब उनका इट्स नॉट समथिंग दैट दे कैन अफोर्ड. एंड आइसोलेशन ऑल्सो जो है, मतलब दे आर काइंड ऑफ फार अवे फ्रॉम मोस्ट थिंग्स, सो वो दैट ऑल्सो काइंड ऑफ डिलेज द डेवलपमेंट. In some communities, if you see, tribal communities में marriage celebrations have become kind of expensive because उनका ये concept नहीं है. See, for us now we live in the future. आज present में हम कहेंगे कि आज काम करना है ताकि कल बुरा ना हो. That's how we are. ठीक है, we are always future specific. We say कि live in the present, think about the present. आज जियो, all these kind of things. ठीक है, वो हम practice में नहीं करेंगे. प्रैक्टिस में मतलब डिड यू एंजॉय टुडे एंड टुडे स्ट्रगल टुडे, नहीं, लाइक कल के लिए हमें स्ट्रगल करना है, कल के लिए, मतलब इट्स ऑलवेज अबाउट द फ्यूचर. ठीक है, 10th में 11th के लिए अच्छा सा स्कूल मिलना है. ठीक है, 12th में अच्छा सा कॉलेज मिलना है. कॉलेज में मतलब व्हेन डिड यू, मतलब यू नेवर हैड टाइम, मतलब यू आर लाइक अच्छा सा प्लेसमेंट होना है, या मतलब मास्टर्स के लिए प्रिपेयर करना है, या एग्जाम के लिए प्रिपेयर करना है. एग्जाम प्रिपेयर कर रहे हो, मतलब अच्छे, यू गेट द पिक्चर, राइट. हम विल नॉट चेंज, बट दे आर इन द प्रेजेंट. दे डोंट हैव दैट कॉन्सेप्ट. मेनी ऑफ देम डोंट हैव द कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ टुमारो. ठीक है, आज शादी है मेरे दोस्त के बेटी के, या मेरे माय ब्रदर के लिए, माय सिस्टर के लिए, माय रिलेटिव, माय नेबर के लिए, somebody not even related. ठीक है, and I am saying that I am not going to be part of it, I am not going to contribute to it because tomorrow के लिए मुझे कुछ चाहिए. Okay, are you nuts? नहीं. ठीक है, मतलब फेस्टिवल है, ठीक है, जो भी मेरे पास है सब कुछ मैं इसमें लगा दूंगा, अच्छे से हम धूमधाम सेलिब्रेट करेंगे. ठीक है, धूमधाम नॉट अकॉर्डिंग टू लाइक हमारे स्टैंडर्ड्स. ठीक है, बट उनके स्टैंडर्ड्स में इट इज एवरीथिंग इन देयर पॉकेट इज बेसिकली गोइंग टू कम आउट. ठीक है, सो दे डोंट लुक एट इट एज टुमारो वाला थिंग. टुमारो को हम देखेंगे. सो फैमिलीज एंड द बोरोइंग मनी, बिकॉज पहले ना वॉट एवर द फॉरेस्ट गेव यू, उससे आप सेलिब्रेट करोगे, बट अभी के लिए मतलब इज देयर एनीथिंग दैट यू गेट फ्रॉम द फॉरेस्ट? नो. ठीक है, मतलब धूमधाम करना है तो मतलब यू गो टू कौन, दैट वेरी नाइस फ्रेंडली मनी लेंडर दैट वी हैव. ठीक है, वेन नेवर यू हैव एनी काइंड ऑफ नीड, वो सडनली अपीयर होता है. ठीक है, ऑलमोस्ट लाइक भगवान. ओके, एंड भगवान ये चेंज हो जाएंगे, ठीक है, आफ्टर सम टाइम, बट द डेट इंक्रीजेस. ठीक है, एंड सी दीज ट्रेडिशंस आर नॉट नेसेसरली बैड, but there's a lot of culture change. ठीक है, but whatever kind of expense that monetary वो बन गया ना, it has become unsustainable. ठीक है, then comes this gradual isolation also, right? So geographical isolation. See, if you are basically in a place जहाँ पे you have to walk 6 hours just to reach school, ठीक है, just to reach school, so मतलब education तो नहीं आने वाला है. ओके, और once in a while होंगे, and वहाँ पे जाके आप देखोगे कोई है ही नहीं. दिस इज अ ट्रू रियलिटी. ठीक है, मतलब मैं ऐसे नहीं बता रहा हूँ. ठीक है, दिस इज एक्चुअल रियलिटी. नाउ दैट इज फाइन. ठीक है, फाइन नहीं है, बट इमेजिन इन कंपेरिजन टू व्हाट आई एम गोइंग टू से, इट इज फाइन. बिकॉज इमेजिन दैट यू हैव अ पेशेंट टुडे हु नीड्स मेडिकल केयर. कैन यू कैरी अ पेशेंट अक्रॉस फॉरेस्ट एंड रिवर्स जहाँ पे रोड्स इनकम्प्लीट है, इंटरनेट नहीं आने वाला है, एम्बुलेंस कोई आएगा नहीं? डेवलपमेंट बिकम्स नेचुरली डिफिकल्ट हियर. ठीक है, दैट इज अ सिंसियर, मतलब दैट्स अ श्योर डेथ. Have you seen these pictures ओडिशा में and these kind of poor kind of places, rural kind of places? वो कौन है जो अपने they are basically carrying a dead body along with them or taking their wife who's like मतलब on the deathbed in a two-wheeler और मतलब ये सब आप देखते हो न्यूज़ में, right? Okay, these clips go viral, but who they tend to be? They are generally these very isolated and mostly tribal communities से ही होते हैं. Some communities also traditionally they prepare these rice-based local beverages. ठीक है, मीनिंग लाइक इट्स लाइक इक्विवेलेंट ऑफ बियर और अल्कोहल, बट इट इज लाइक मेड फ्रॉम योर बार्ली या आपका मिलेट या मतलब आपका राइस एंड मतलब फर्मेंटेड ड्रिंक है ये. ठीक है, दिस इज बेसिकली व्हाट इट इज. सो व्हाट हैपेंड स्पेशली व्हेन यू हैड द कमर्शलाइजेशन ब्रिटिश एंड पोस्ट ब्रिटिश. ठीक है, दे वहाँ पे ऐसा नहीं है कि मतलब कंजम्पशन इज बार्ड. ठीक है, इट इज जस्ट सम काइंड ऑफ अ ड्रिंक. ठीक है, मतलब लिटिल बिट ऑफ फर्मेंटेशन से वो पीते थे. बट व्हाट हैपेंड इज दैट कमर्शियल अल्कोहल स्टार्टेड एंड the alcohol के लिए what they did is that नहीं, you cannot make your own, you cannot brew your own. ठीक है, but you can buy. उसके लिए भी you have that friendly neighbor of yours, that money lender who will always come and help you so that you can create new addictions. ठीक है, and you can create new problems. Your health starts deteriorating because you can't drink it like how you used to drink. पूजा के लिए भी वो रखते थे वो सब. You get the picture, right? So now if you drink this alcohol, ठीक है, this commercial those kind of alcohol, ठीक है, वहाँ से आपका हेल्थ है, आपके फैमिली सफ़र होते हैं. Now of course I want to say this again, this is not universal, not every tribe faces alcohol addiction in the same extent. ठीक है, so I don't want to stereotype this and neither should you. ठीक है, but it does happen in many places. Now if I can connect everything together, ठीक है, there is exploitation plus isolation, there is displacement, ठीक है, plus poor implementation of everything that we promise. We say low productivity, ठीक है, plus because of that indebtedness. Together all of these kind of factors now, they are basically creating this kind of socio-economic marginalization. वो marginalized बन रहे हैं. And what essentially follows, you can see this, right? Socio-economic marginalization of tribes. And because of this, so many problems come in. What are the problems? Your land alienation आपके syllabus में, poverty आपके syllabus में, illiteracy आपके problem syllabus में, unemployment आपके syllabus में, poor health होगा, malnutrition होगा, and things like this. ठीक है? And all of these things, so the last 200 years has just been the worst, the hardest. ठीक है? So completely frustrated, है वो. When this frustration basically continues for many decades, some regions, they witness ethnic conflicts. This is your next part of your syllabus. ठीक है? Some experience regional movements, another part of your syllabus. A few districts, I don't want to even say few regions, ठीक है? A few districts actually get affected by left-wing extremism, like Bastar and so on. ठीक है? That becomes your next part of your syllabus. So I'm basically connecting everything. It is like a flow chart. ठीक है? मतलब notice करो, ठीक है? Poverty alone does not create extremism. ठीक है? Because who's in poverty? ठीक है? Most of you. ठीक है? Until you get the job, right? Until then you are basically dependent. But you will never have that kind of a thought कि मतलब extremism. ऐसा नहीं आता है. But if you have long-standing marginalization, जहाँ पे you're completely dependent on somebody else for your sustenance, and all you're seeing is that people exploiting you, and you're not getting your justice for 2, 3, 4 generations, ठीक है? Plus your weak governance, and then complete sort of social exclusion from everyone, that will create fertile conditions for left-wing extremism. So what is the lesson that I'm trying to tell you here? Tribal problems जो है, it cannot be blamed only on tribals. Neither can it be only blamed on the outsiders. But to a great extent it is the outsiders. But the reality जो है, it is much more complex. So anthropology teaches you to look at all sides. ठीक है? Only then you'll be able to design better policies, better justice and better development in a manner that they want. Not in the manner that you want. ये लो, ये हम करेंगे. नहीं. You have to see what they want. Is this clear? Understood? And this is, by the way, your entire syllabus. हो गया. Done. So let me take you to your chapter number 6.2, which is the second part of your syllabus. The problems are, as I told you, land alienation, poverty, indebtedness, low literacy, education कम है, underemployment, unemployment, health, nutrition. So we'll take a look at each of these. पहला वाला is going to be your land alienation. Okay, land alienation. Land alienation. Now imagine your grandfather had planted a tree. What is your favorite fruit? ठीक है, minus mango. ठीक है. Imagine your grandfather planted a mango tree. Okay, and your father protected that particular tree, and you also grew up beside that tree, eating those trees and so on. Every birthday basically happened there. Every festival of your community happened there. Every memory of your childhood and your adulthood basically belongs there. Okay, now imagine one fine day, in the morning, somebody comes and says ki, who are you? ठीक है, आप कौन हो? This land is no longer yours. ठीक है, देखो, ये आपका नहीं है. ठीक है, अगर आपका है, show me the proof. What proof? ठीक है, पेपर दिखाओ. ठीक है, suddenly मतलब in the morning you see कि मतलब somebody is coming into your place where you have lived for so long. ठीक है, no warning, no discussion, no choice, हटो is what you are being told. How would you feel? Would you feel sad? Would you feel angry? मतलब आपको बताना है, ठीक है. Would you feel helpless? What is your attitude? Okay, that feeling जो है is exactly what most tribal communities experience even in today's time period. That is your land alienation. This is exactly what is happening. It simply means loss of one's own land. ठीक है, it is loss of one's own land. LOOL. ठीक है, loss of one's own land. But remember something here. When tribals lose their land, they don't lose only property. ठीक है, हमारे माइंड में land is property. ठीक है, you lose that land. You feel कि अगर मेरे पास वो land होता, अगर मेरे पापा जी had not given it to somebody, or my grandfather had not basically sold it for something, it would have ये हुआ होगा, वो हुआ होगा, I would have lived like this, हम ऐसे सोचेंगे. ठीक है, but to them ना, it is not money, it is not property, it is not asset. ठीक है, land is their livelihood. ठीक है, उनका अर्निंग, उनका रोटी कपड़ा मकान, नॉट अर्निंग लाइक अ सैलरी का नहीं है, इट्स देयर आइडेंटिटी. ठीक है, आई एम टोडास ऑफ नीलगिरीज, ऑफ दीज हिल्स, नॉट एंटायर नीलगिरीज बट दीज हिल्स. इट इज़ माई कल्चर, इट इज़ माई वे ऑफ लाइफ, एवरीथिंग इज सेलिब्रेटेड हियर, एवरीथिंग इज हियर. Land is my god, land is my goddess, land is sacred to me, it is my sacred forests. ठीक है, land is where my ancestors are, land is where my memories are. Everything essentially disappears if you take land from them. It is not like ours. Okay, ये घर छोटा है, ठीक है, and if we can afford, we go to a bigger home without any kind of issue. ठीक है, we have upgrade ourselves. उनको वो नहीं चाहिए. Never ever abandon. ठीक है, it is not something that can be. That is why anthropologists consider land alienation as the biggest tribal problem in modern India. The biggest problem in modern India. What exactly is land alienation? We said na, L-O-O-O-L. ठीक है, but again we'll start with, we'll understand it with one simple example. Imagine that there is Ramu. ठीक है, Ramu. Okay, Ramu के wife को just give her a name and give the 2 kids का एक name. I'll take those as well. ठीक है, but should sound like a tribal farmer who's living in Jharkhand or something, or Chhattisgarh. ठीक है. Now Ramu, let's say, and the tribes are not like so poor. मतलब उनका forest is their world. ठीक है, मतलब imagine what is your backyard, garden है क्या घर में? Yes, मतलब इतने thousands of acres के forest है मेरे. Do you have any pet animals? Pet तो sometimes it is my pet, but a lot of times it can be dangerous as well. Elephants है, ठीक है, मतलब snakes है. Right, मतलब it's a forest. ठीक है, he owns acres there. मतलब that is his world. Of course, papers. That is enough for his survival. Okay, 1 year, let's say Ramu's daughter, you can name her. Okay, she starts falling ill, right? Because it's a tough life there, and and vaccine. You get the picture, right? So, abhi, if you don't have access to those kind of forests as much, okay, that means you don't have your आपके medicines नहीं है वहाँ से. You have to go to hospital. ठीक है, now everybody is saying कि मतलब no, hospital is the right way. ठीक है, आपको कुछ नहीं पता. Okay, your medicines are not medicines. ठीक है, हमारा medicine is basically medicine. The only thing is that we have side effects and ये है वो है and things like this. ठीक है, and one more thing is that it is also very expensive. And one more thing कि आपको health insurance लेना पड़ेगा. उसके लिए आपको you get the picture, right? मतलब it's a cycle. Hospital expenses increase to an extent मतलब they can't afford. ठीक है, they say कि मतलब you need let's say 1 lakh. ठीक है, ऐसे होते हैं. ठीक है, आजकल तो मेडिकल में you think that 1 lakh मतलब last at least since COVID आपको पता चलता है कि मतलब people before some dear member of their family died, कितने lakhs they had tried to spend. It didn't work, but you get the picture, right? It's become like that. He goes to whom? That favorite neighbor of his, always smiling, who's always welcoming him. आ जाओ थोड़ा सा ये पियो, ठीक है, एंड ये कागज़ दे दो, मतलब ये कागज़ ले लो, उसमें साइन करो, अंगूठा लगाओ और समथिंग. ठीक है, जस्ट मॉर्गेज योर लैंड एज सिक्योरिटी. ठीक है, जस्ट से कि मतलब राइट नाउ योर नेबर बेसिकली ओन्स दिस पर्टिकुलर थिंग, बट अगर आपने पे कर दिया मुझे अलॉन्ग विद द कंपाउंडिंग ऑफ इंटरेस्ट एट ओनली 3% पर डे और पर मंथ और वट एवर इट इज़. ठीक है, आई विल गिव यू दिस पेपर बैक, क्या है चाहिए, मतलब फाड़ देंगे एंड सो ऑन. I was like, oh, that's very nice. My daughter's life is what is most important. ठीक है, and then क्या है वो, ठीक है, is there any way in which he is going to be able to pay it plus interest? नहीं हो पाएगा. ठीक है, the land has gone. ठीक है, next year let's say उसका crop fail हो जाता है, he cannot repay. ठीक है, रामू का brother शामू, ठीक है, his crops fail. ठीक है, then what happens is that मतलब now तो मतलब you can't get anything, you don't have access to forest, मतलब livelihood, so interest keeps increasing. Soon what happens is that the loan जो है उसका it becomes much larger. ठीक है, again you have to go back to the money lender, your land is mine. ठीक है, so Shamu becomes a laborer. He's working as a laborer on his own land, and his children have to also work on that particular land for no income because you owe him money. This is also land alienation. Again, if you notice carefully here, nobody is stealing land overnight. कि हटो यहाँ से, force से नहीं कर रहे हैं, but the systemic problem, I hope that you're able to understand. The debt is slowly converted, it's converting an owner into a laborer, and that is the tragedy here. You understand? It is happening. It is happening as we speak. ठीक है, again if you can see, imagine there's a tribal family living happily in the forest. They need very very little, कुछ नहीं चाहिए. Okay, everything that they need basically comes from the forest, whether it is food, whether it is medicine, whether it is honey, whether it is bamboo to build your home, firewood, clean water, all these kind of things come from So मतलब imagine this kind of a this kind of a lifestyle is basically what many scholars basically call it as the Zen lifestyle. Simple, peaceful, happy. ठीक है, very few possessions, material life नहीं है. ठीक है, but complete freedom. Then one day somebody comes. ठीक है, let's call it a mining company. ठीक है, XYZ mining company comes, or maybe a dam का project, or perhaps even it is getting notified as a tiger reserve, right? The family is told कि मतलब ये आपका place नहीं है. Out you go. If I come tomorrow and if I find you here, ठीक है, हम पूरा force के साथ आके आप सबको निकालेंगे, and it is not going to be good. Now the family has to relocate. They go live next to whatever is a town or something. उनका life, उनका forest disappeared. New expenses are coming in. ठीक है, इलेक्ट्रिसिटी चाहिए, बिल पे करो, बस में यहाँ से यहाँ तक जाना है, बस टिकट लो, ठीक है, स्कूल में उसको पढ़ाना है, ठीक है, स्कूल फीस दो, ठीक है, इफ़ यू वांट समबडी टू टेक केयर ऑफ यू एंड गिव यू सम काइंड ऑफ मेडिसिन बिकॉज देयर इज सम काइंड ऑफ प्रॉब्लम, हॉस्पिटल के फीस है, ठीक है, मोबाइल से किसी को बात करना है किसी से, ठीक है, मोबाइल को रिचार्ज करो. मीनिंग इट इज़ द मार्केट इकोनॉमी. वेयर विल इट कम फ्रॉम? ठीक है, इट इज़ अ मनी बेस्ड सिस्टम फॉर एवरी सिंगल थिंग. इट हैज़ एंटर्ड देयर लाइफ नाउ. ठीक है, अर्लियर यू नो लाइफ डिपेंड ऑन रेसिप्रोसिटी, म्यूचुअल शेयरिंग का था. ठीक है, everything needs cash today now. That is why many tribals suddenly start needing loans, right? In the last 100 years, last 70 years, everything के लिए you cannot do without a money lender, and the money lender are the kindest people to you because everybody is desperate to give you that money. You understand, na? They're getting land. ठीक है, that debt creates land alienation. Abhi if you can come and ask me for money, ठीक है, in a year your land is mine. ठीक है, एंड आई एम गेटिंग इट ऑलमोस्ट लाइक यू नो फ्री ऑफ कॉस्ट, मतलब कम के लिए. योर डॉटर फॉल्स इल, ठीक है, मुझे ये वाला लैंड मिलेगा. यू अंडरस्टैंड ना, दिस इज एग्जैक्टली द केस एंड मेनी आउटसाइडर्स हैव एक्चुअली डन दिस. इट इज हैपनिंग एज वी स्पीक. हाउ डज इट हैपन? ठीक है, वील अंडरस्टैंड ईच ऑफ द कॉजेस. मतलब यू नो, मतलब एक, मतलब यू नो आई विल शो यू लाइक, मतलब लाइक अ डिटेक्टिव आप, यू नो, यू हैव टू लुक एट हाउ ऑल डज इट हैपन, राइट? सो दिस एग्जैक्टली व्हाट आई हैव ड्रॉन हियर एंड यू विल बी एबल टू अंडरस्टैंड. आई हैव एक्सप्लेन्ड द सेम थिंग. नाउ व्हाट आर द कॉजेस ऑफ दिस लैंड एलिनेशन? ठीक है, all these stories I've told you. There is a chronic shortage of cash in many of these communities, and the reason is, again we'll start. ठीक है, imagine that you live inside a forest, you're growing your food, you're collecting honey, maybe if there is water bodies and so on, you catch fish. Okay, anything that you need, you exchange. Do you really need money? ठीक है, they never needed money. Now things are changing, everything has changed. Children के लिए you need schools, hospitals के लिए they need money. ठीक है, अगर आपको देख के वो बता देंगे कि एडमिट करेंगे कि नहीं करेंगे. You understand, ना? ठीक है, government offices basically need documents. That's a worst place. ठीक है, you know, even if you go to a bank or you know a PSU का bank, ठीक है, it is very difficult to be able to manage. मेरे लिए भी, you know, when I was like well educated, you know, young grad, and I had to do this kind of banking related stuff. It used to be कि मतलब ये fill करके आओ, ये fill करना नहीं आता, ठीक है, and then you end up like filling everything. They're like ये चाहिए था, ठीक है, नहीं यहाँ पे ये नहीं आना है, वो आना है, ठीक है. You how difficult is it? ठीक है, to get used to a PSU का forms itself is such a big deal. Okay, मतलब you know after a year it gets better, but like you know imagine them. ठीक है, it's very difficult. ठीक है, बस टिकट आपको चाहिए from here to here to admit your child, ठीक है, into hospital, you need cash. ठीक है, और can you give me the cash बोल के आप एक रिलेटिव को बात करना चाह रहे हो, you can't, the bus is not taking you, you want to speak to them in a mobile के लिए they say कि it needs cash. ठीक है, life has become completely cash based, but income has remained unchanged. There's nothing. ठीक है, so the result is chronic shortage of cash. Whenever there is an emergency, people have to borrow money, and borrowing often leads to the cycle of land alienation. ठीक है. Second one, inadequate agricultural aid. Again, imagine that, you know, in your farm now, and look at your farm. What is your farm like? There is no tractor, there is no irrigation, there is no fertilizer, there is no scientific seeds or anything, only simple tools, traditional kind of agriculture. And the output means, आपका total production जो है, the output remain low. It always remains low. Okay, and they never had to increase it because they needed only enough to feed their family. ठीक है, they don't, मतलब you don't need extra. ठीक है, we need extra because we want to sell, we want to take it to market, we want to make profit, we want to use that profit to you get the picture. They are different. So a question for you: if the income stays constant or low, ठीक है, और मतलब nil, how will medical emergencies be managed? Again, loan becomes the only option. Money lender है, ठीक है, simple farming वो करते हैं, low income है, more borrowing result. ठीक है, same cycle repeats again and again and again. Third one is chronic indebtedness. Now imagine that you borrowed 50,000 rupees because maybe उस साल के लिए your crops have failed or you know you had to borrow again for a reason. Interest again increased. ठीक है, you borrowed again to pay that particular interest. This becomes your chronic indebtedness. This means a permanent debt. Money lenders know that you, meaning Ramu, you cannot repay. They're still happily lending to you. Whenever Ramu essentially comes, they are happy. Why? Because Ramu के पास land है. Ramu, you know, lived a good life. Okay, Zen life. Okay, and Ramu के लिए the land does not mean the same thing as it does to you. ठीक है, land has given me everything. ठीक है, but it's not like, you know, my property. ठीक है, and they are not interested in the money as well. They are these money lenders जो है, they are basically giving that money, not because they want to help, not because they want to earn their, they are interested in Ramu's land, in your land. ठीक है, land is the real target, and the loan becomes that particular trap. I cannot trap your land unless you take a loan from me, and I cannot force that loan on you. Of course, if I can get you into alcohol, then of course it becomes a lot easier, but there are other reasons as well for it. Okay? There are some interesting case studies, classic case studies. Anthropology becomes interesting when we study real people, real places, real suffering. The first example that you can see, the first case that you can see is the Korwa tribe, and they are in Madhya Pradesh. They were these money lenders, Muslim Mians, Mia, okay? And they were money lenders by profession, right? They were offering loans, non-tribals basically, okay? There is only one condition. I want to help you, you are my Ramu, okay? The only thing that I need from you is mortgage your land. Okay, many families, and they are in dire need. Suddenly from a non-cash economy to a cash economy, you need money. ठीक है, आज के लिए कितने टाइम यू यूज्ड योर फोन पे और कैश? सोचो, चाय चाहिए, ठीक है, कैश, ठीक है, फोन, यू ऑफ कोर्स यू नॉट पेइंग दिस एवरी डे, बट एवरीथिंग ऑन अ डेली बेसिस दैट यू डू इज मनी. Many families basically went to that money lender. ठीक है, later what happened is that liquor addiction हुआ. That was encouraged by the money lenders, these Miyas. ठीक है, the Miyas might not be drinking, but they want you to drink. They want you to have a good time. ठीक है, you're in sorrows, you're in difficulty. ठीक है, डूबो in alcohol. ठीक है, but you understand now, there is always an ulterior motive. They don't know. ठीक है, too innocent to be able to understand the reality of the outside life. ठीक है, उनका इनकम नहीं है, debt kept snowballing, the land finally passed into the money lender's hands. ठीक है, and imagine losing both your health also, your liver also, and your land together. ठीक है, everything gone. Another case study is Tharus and the Bhoksa. ठीक है, these are the communities in Uttarakhand, and after partition what happened is there were many people from Pakistan. Okay, Pakistan partition jab hua tha, see many people from India actually went that side, and many people from that side essentially came here, mainly in Punjab mostly, and then some in Sindh as well. So many refugee families ko accommodate karne ke liye we had sort of settled them nearby, near the Tharus, Boksas, those kind of areas. ठीक है, वहाँ पे आके वो कैसे करेंगे? We were like so and so kind of life in Punjab. Hey, maybe with the money that we have, we can become money lenders. ठीक है, this seems like a good profession. ठीक है, they offered loans, outsiders. ठीक है, and the tribals are like trusting them because you need money. And slowly what happened? The the land का documents वो बना के आपको दे रहे हैं ताकि आप वो उनको दोगे. After signing, ownership basically started changing hands. So the innocent tribals, they lost everything. The lesson is the exploitation rarely happens in one day. It happens little by little, and a few decades you will notice कि complete marginalization हो जाता है. ठीक है, both of these are classic case studies. Okay. Now who are the rich people, right? If they had the kind of land, they would have been the well-off people. But today it is the people who have come, and settle in that kind of place because unka bhi difficulty hai. But these people don't know ki how to deal with the world. So we blame the money lenders. But ask yourself, what if money lenders did not exist? Okay, why would a person there not be a money lender? Would tribal land still be lost? Sadly, the answer is yes here also, because sometimes the system itself creates problems. For example, this poor experience with government credit societies are there. Okay, so imagine that Ramu at this particular point has understood. Okay, money lenders, that very nice smiley wala money lender jo hai, he's not a good person. Okay, ulterior motives are there. And Ramu is finally saying, I won't visit the money lender anymore. Okay, I will visit a government ka bank because the government says ki, we are making provisions for you that you don't fall into the hands of these money lenders. Sounds like the right decision. Okay, late, but it is the right decision. Okay, but what happens? There is an officer. The officer thinks कि कहाँ पे post किया है मुझे, ठीक है, कब 2 years or till my transfer, ठीक है, okay. Then the loan officer or the officer there who's supposed to actually, whose job is to give them the loan का this thing from the credit societies, ठीक है, give you those kind of things, says कि अच्छा ये क्या है, ये वाला paper, then you're just looking for reasons to basically not process it. आधार है क्या, आधार का स्पेलिंग राइट है क्या, ठीक है, लैंड का रिकॉर्ड है क्या, उसके पहला वाला लैंड रिकॉर्ड है क्या, एनओसी है क्या, इनकम सर्टिफिकेट है क्या, ओके, इनकम टैक्स पे किया है क्या, ठीक है, ब्रिंग योर रेवेन्यू का एक्सट्रैक्ट, आपका लैंड ओनरशिप का डॉक्यूमेंट, ब्रिंग 2 witnesses, fill this particular form, sign this here, sign again, attach photographs, come tomorrow, come next week. Have you ever I have not been to these government credit societies, but I have been to government offices. ठीक है, doesn't it feel like doesn't it feel like it's your real experience? ठीक है, movies में देखा होगा, if you don't have real experience. ठीक है, if I find it difficult, okay, and I can handle things, ठीक है, I can handle things better than most people. Okay, how can Ramu handle? Imagine an illiterate, a person who cannot read, a tribal elder, because he's in charge and takes decisions. He neither understands the language in which the officer is speaking, nor the procedure, and he needs the money. Okay, not after you bring all of these things and process. He needs the money today. The tribal elder, 70 years old. Okay, what happens? Okay, he walks back. Okay, straight to the money lender, the smiley money lender. Money lender is like, hey, I told you this thing. Okay, kya karoge? What? Okay, he asks this question. Kya karoge? The money lender also says कि only one particular question, no documents whatsoever, सिर्फ एक document, ठीक है, वो मैं बना के देता हूँ, sign करके, you take how much ever you need, you can take. Okay, the money comes within minutes. That convenience makes exploitation easier. Sometimes a bad option looks attractive because that good option जो है, it is way too complicated and that government officer will, just too sad. ठीक है, मतलब आप ऐसे मत करो. Never ever should you ever do this thing. And if you see somebody do this to a tribal elder, somebody ना, मतलब somebody who cannot handle this thing, please stop it. जाके मतलब बताओ. Okay, it can't go on like this. Take too much. Worse things have essentially happened. Okay, you understood? Then comes your mining and industries. Imagine, a mountain covered with forests. Close eyes close karo. Okay, there's a mountain, full of green. Like fluorescent green ka ek forest hai. Streams are flowing gently. You can hear the sounds. Okay, the birds are singing. The children are playing. Right? Then suddenly you see, people who are, एक helmet वगैरह पहन के, एक suspender वगैरह लगा के, they are basically coming here and they are like, we are the geologists. ठीक है, we are come here to discover, any kind of ores that are possible in this particular location. They are like, oh, bauxite is there, iron ore is there, coal is there, any of these things. Suddenly that fluorescent mountain is, for sure that fluorescent green mountain is no longer going to be a forest. ठीक है, it becomes a mining project. Companies are going to arrive here, roads are going to appear here, machines are going to start making that sound, roaring machines. Mountains are going to disappear. Who lived here before mining? It's a tribal communities. When I made you close your eyes and visualize, how was it? 10 years down the line, how many of these tribal communities will be here? No. And if they are in that, inside those caves, inside those mines, doing the hard labor. Okay, children, the pura place changed. A good example is going to be this Niyamgiri hills of this Dongriya Kond. Okay, in Odisha. For them, the mountain is not just a mountain. Okay, it is their god. It is Niyam Raja. It is their sacred deity. Okay, but the mountain is not just a mountain. You understand this? It's not just land. Imagine somebody saying, we will mine your temple. ठीक है, आपका temple को तोड़ के, ठीक है, we are going to make something, and you understand that that's always a touchy thing. ठीक है, how do you sort of, people still feel hundreds of years later कि मतलब हमारे temple को तोड़ा है. Now you are going ahead and अभी भी तोड़ रहे हो. ठीक है, a long struggle happened in the Supreme Court where anthropologists and activists and so many people actually helped them. The Supreme Court basically said, nahi, we'll do it according to the rule. Village assembly, the Gram Sabha, the people, Panchayat extension schedule areas वगैरह है, ठीक है, the people should decide. And the villagers, unanimously rejected mining. ठीक है. Now, of course, you might think कि ये development नहीं है and all of this, people should actually be moved. India का GDP बढ़ना है. ठीक है, मतलब GDP का बढ़ने का impact, think on Ramu. ठीक है, it is a landmark victory for Ramus. ठीक है, remember this, development matters, but development should happen with consent. You cannot say कि मतलब सबको हटो, हम आपका कुछ करेंगे, देखेंगे, all these kind of things. ठीक है, that cannot be development. ठीक है, किसी और के पीठ के ऊपर खड़े रह के to say कि मतलब I have arrived, okay, you have not arrived. ठीक है, straight to hell हम जाएंगे. We cannot, that is not development, that is not something that we want. ठीक है, another example is Balco. ठीक है, Balco is, they had these mining operations. Many tribal communities from Baiga families, Baiga communities, they were displaced. Some received some मतलब थोड़ा सा compensation. ठीक है, बोलोगे कि 1 लाख देंगे या 50,000 देंगे, मतलब 500 रुपए दे दिया, okay, अगले बार आओ, ठीक है, I'll give you the rest. एक और 500 दे दिया and उसके बाद आते जाओ, ठीक है, but many of them will not get the full amount. ठीक है, in order to sort of process it, ठीक है, what are you giving me? Okay, openly ऐसे होते हैं, and many struggle to rebuild their life after these things happen. ठीक है, you see, money can buy houses, but can money buy back their memories? ठीक है, can money replace their forests? Okay, and even if the answer is a yes, ठीक है, money भी नहीं मिल रहा है. All of these things are still just so hard. ठीक है, next is going to be large infrastructure projects like dams. Imagine India needs, okay, do we need electricity or no? ठीक है, electricity तो चाहिए. ठीक है, if you're listening, dear state government, ठीक है, please don't cut electricity. I have to do my job. I want electricity. I also need water. I need irrigation. I need flood control and so on. So because of this, the governments built dams. ठीक है, of course the benefits are real and so on, and nobody denies that. But ask this one particular question: where will that dam ka, that reservoir, ठीक है, meaning the lake behind the dam, मतलब you know how a dam works ना, where is that going to come from? You're going to build in those kind of places जहाँ पे मेरा घर नहीं जा रहा है, आपका घर नहीं जा रहा है, किसका घर जा रहा है? You will very nicely choose those places which are tribal villages. You'll choose those places there are forests. You will choose those places जहाँ पे people का sustenance है. Great example, Sardar Sarovar Dam, ठीक है, on the Narmada River, ठीक है, nearly 2 lakh people were basically displaced because of this. Many were Adivasis. Most of them were Adivasis. Imagine your village, your home, ठीक है, going underwater, your school, your temple, your ancestors का burials. All these things basically disappear, and they say कि मतलब you know, see, but you know, development has to come for others. ठीक है, Nataraj is basically teaching there, उसको electricity चाहिए, ठीक है, so all these sacrifices are like, you know, okay, because you know that is a good thing. Is it okay? Is it not? ठीक है, for all the Ramus, you know, many of these tribals are the ones who paid the price for you and me to be able to be here and you know, learn like this, right? So again, so we've discussed all these, you know, developmental projects and all that, you know, sometimes even conservation के लिए भी, you know, Ramus have to suffer. ठीक है, national parks and tiger reserves. This is probably the most emotional part of today's class, maybe. ठीक है, imagine a family that is living peacefully inside the forest for hundreds of years, maybe even thousands of years. ठीक है, they never hunted the tigers. Instead, they respected the forest, the flora and the fauna. They protected those streams. They prayed to those streams. ठीक है, they prevented the fires from happening because you know we cannot allow our forest to suffer. ठीक है, every plant के लिए they think of it. You know, it has a life. उनका वर्ल्ड व्यू इतना ग्रेट है, ठीक है, ऑल द अदर वर्ल्ड व्यूज को कंपेयर करोगे, द वे इन विच दे केयर इज समथिंग दैट कैन नॉट मैच. ठीक है, नेवर वांटिंग हार्म फॉर एनी. Suddenly the officials start arriving. What do? This area is now been declared as a tiger reserve. Okay, please leave. What did we do to the tigers? ठीक है, the family asks, but this is our home. It has always been. Right? Of course, you know, sometimes, you know, the tiger has basically come and taken one of our, you know, animals or something like that. Okay? But, you know, we pray to the tiger. The tiger is our clan. The tiger is our, you know, sacred. The tiger is what we pray to and so on. Doesn't matter. Okay? Look at this document. Okay? You must leave. One famous example is Kanha Tiger Reserve, right? Around 450 Baiga families and Gond families and all, they were basically relocated. And relocation के बाद का story में आपको, not in today's class, but I'll tell you later, but it is the worst. ठीक है, many activists, if somebody basically comes and tells you कि मतलब, you know, things are going to become hunky dory and you know, world ऐसा है वैसा है, सब कुछ मिलेगा, कुछ नहीं मिलेगा. ठीक है, because वहाँ पे हमारा implementation बहुत poor है. Many activists, anthropologists have argued that the compensation that we basically provide them is very inadequate. ठीक है, मतलब एक महीने में, before you settle down in a new place, ठीक है, it's all over. Before the money is basically released to you, इतने बार आप, you know, चढ़ोगे वो steps to meet the अफसर, ठीक है, कि मतलब it's not even funny. ठीक है. These were the people who had been protecting the forest, who had been praying to the tigers. You know, even before the forest departments had been doing their jobs, it used to be the tribals, and they did a much better job at it. Even the forest department will understand this. Okay? They know it. Okay? Many scholars also basically argue that the first conservationists in the whole wide world are the tribals. उनके forest में आके आप कुछ करने का try करो, you will understand, you know what it means to them. ठीक है, a very important statement that was actually made by a former मतलब, you know, UN का special UN expert. ठीक है, that person actually estimated that nearly half you know, of the world's protected areas जो है, it exists on lands that were traditionally used by indigenous communities. Some place में we call them as indigenous communities, some place में native communities, some place में tribal communities and so on. You'll see them later. Think about that number, half the forests. Half of the forest, wherever you have forests, ठीक है, half of them, you know, वहाँ पे displacement हुआ है. That is why this issue is not only important so far as India is concerned, it is also a मतलब global issue है. Okay. Okay, so these things kind of matter. Lack of implementation of laws, a lot of forest policies. See, even if you look at the conservation with tribals now, if you see, there are some good news as well. So for example, some good news can be, you know, imagine there is another forest जहाँ पे this time the government basically says you can stay and the people are here basically For example, there is an example of Soliga tribe. Okay, this is in Karnataka state. So have you guys heard of this thing? There is a place called as Biligiri. ठीक है, Biligiri Ranganatha Swamy Tiger Reserve. ठीक है, BRT reserve also is basically called. You will study in environment. ठीक है, आपको सब रटना पड़ेगा कि कौन सा टाइगर रिजर्व कहाँ पे है, मतलब कौन सा नेशनल पार्क कहाँ पे है. All these things you will study, you will know this. ठीक है. So there is a tribe called as a Soliga tribe that exists here. And I was checking if I have a picture here, ठीक है, but I will write the name, okay? You will see all of these, ठीक है, एक एक करके. I can't dump everything in one place. Soliga tribe. Soliga tribe. Okay, Soliga tribe. Okay, what is the place? BRT reserve में. Something amazing happened. The tiger population actually increased. Okay, because the Soligas, in fact, the forest ka health improved, the forest ka conservation improved, the forest got regenerated because, and वहाँ पे ना the Soligas said कि if you remove us, you remove the tigers. ठीक है, and that is such a beautiful sentence because उनका knowledge जो है protected the forest even before modern science had come. Okay, you ask them कितने tigers हैं, ठीक है, you will have कि ये stripe का method है, हम यहाँ पे ये camera लगा. You ask a Soliga person, they will tell you exactly how many tigers are there. From where to where, which is their route, कहाँ पे जा रहे हैं, which one is pregnant, which one has given birth, okay, which one is fighting, सब कुछ उनको पता है. The best conservationists already live inside these forests. The second we start removing them, the forest का, this thing has gone down. Okay, this poor implementation of laws, ठीक है, the poor implementation of laws. See, India is a country probably has the, मतलब इतने excellent laws हैं. You hear all of these things, it is the greatest thing, ठीक है, but the power to implement. The problem is always with the implementation. Suppose your father promises you a bicycle, he even buys it, ठीक है, or whatever was your gift that you wanted in your childhood, ठीक है, मेरे में like I wanted bicycles, ठीक है, he buys it also, but he's just not able to bring it and then give it to you जहाँ पे आप बैठ सकोगे उसमें and उसको चला सकोगे, ठीक है. So मतलब intention was there, ठीक है, ability to buy is there, money is there, ठीक है, but to bring that cycle to you and make you sit on it, वो नहीं हो रहा है, you don't have it. ठीक है, so many tribal laws exist beautifully on paper, but उनका implementation finally कि वो जो हम कह रहे हैं और वो जो आप करवा रहे हैं, ठीक है, that is not in sync. ठीक है, implementation is weak. ठीक है, compensation delays, rehabilitation delays, ठीक है, officers who don't care, ठीक है, corruption in left, right and center. So the rights only exist inside those files and those papers. Good laws, poor execution. ठीक है, that combination has been hurting communities to a great extent. Forest policies, again, there's a whole different topic as well. Okay, there is this restrictive forest policies, starting from your 1800s, right? Post Sepoy Mutiny, the British are trying to get more control over the forests, not for conservation, because they want the resources of the forest, okay, so that they can fuel their industrial revolution, create some things, and then bring them as final products. History mein ab dekho. Now imagine your family has been collecting honey and from one forest, one patch of this particular forest for let's say centuries. And suddenly someone says कि मतलब entry prohibited, ठीक है, and this suddenly happened to many people, right? Because it was, how would you say कि it is entry prohibited? मैं ही हूँ यहाँ पे. Your entry is prohibited, भाई. आप कैसे आ रहे हो यहाँ पे, साहिब? Then they are like नहीं. See, how do you say कि entry is prohibited? ठीक है, you have to have kind of laws. ठीक है, I'm bringing this kind of law. देखो यहाँ पे Indian Forest Act of 1927 या मतलब in 1890s का ये या 1865 का ये. You get the picture, right? So essentially through these kind of laws, what they had done is that the control is shifting from the communities that live there to the forest officials to a point जहाँ पे if you even sort of plant a tree or a plant, okay, in the forest, you're a criminal. Can you imagine this? Not because you're cutting it, ठीक है, if you plant, इतना control चला गया. So many of the traditional rights जो है, they were kind of restricted and you just don't have it until all the way till your Forest Rights Act came in 2006. So we are trying to attempt to correct those historical injustices. मतलब ये past में this unfair kind of treatment. It started recognizing कि communities के कुछ rights होते हैं, forest produce के कुछ rights होते हैं, कुछ habitat के rights होते हैं, community forests होते हैं. Okay, so this law is extremely important for your UPSC anthropology. So if land alienation is such a serious problem, can anything be done? Thankfully, yes. What are those? In fact, again, you can see, right? There are different kind of typologies. You can see landlessness hai, land, loss of land through surveys and settlements. The second you do surveys and you come and ask, kaun sa paper hai, kahan pe hai, if you understand land alienation, it simply means tribals are essentially losing their land, but it can be so many different kind of processes. Many I've already talked about. फर्स्ट इज योर प्राइवेट ट्रांजैक्शन, मीनिंग मॉर्गेजिंग योर लैंड, इलीगल काइंड ऑफ सेल, एनक्रोचमेंट, सब कुछ होते हैं, ठीक है, बाय द नॉन ट्राइबल्स. Second is through displacement. So let's say second is displacement. When land is acquired for dams, yeah, mines, yeah, industries, many tribal families end up doing what? Okay, they lose both their, private land, yeah, government cultivated land, whatever it is. Okay, then there is surveys and settlement. Sometimes land cultivated for millennia, yeah, centuries, okay, for generations is wrongly recorded as government land, revenue land, ये land, forest land. ठीक है, शिफ्टिंग कल्टिवेशन अगर आप देखोगे, इट यूज टू बी डन, चुम फार्मिंग एज वी कॉल इट, वहाँ का एरियाज दे स्टार्टेड गेटिंग क्लासिफाइड एज स्टेट का फॉरेस्ट. ठीक है, देन देर इज फॉरेस्ट का नोटिफिकेशन. व्हेन फॉरेस्ट आर डिक्लेयर्ड एज रिजर्व फॉरेस्ट, ट्राइबल राइट्स, मतलब क्या ट्राइबल राइट्स, ठीक है, इट्स रिजर्व नाउ. ठीक है, सो मेनी जेन्युइन क्लेम्स जो है दे रिमेन अनरेगुलराइज्ड. ठीक है, सो मीनिंग यू आर लैंडलेस. ठीक है, एंड वॉट एवर यू आर बेसिकली अभी जो हो, इट इज इलीगल. ठीक है, इवन गवर्नमेंट के वेस्ट लैंड जो है, दे आर बेसिकली, इट्स सपोज टू बी, यू हैव डिफरेंट काइंड ऑफ प्रोग्राम्स जहाँ पे उन्हीं के लैंड को लेके उसको वेस्ट लैंड करके वी आर सपोज टू डिस्ट्रीब्यूट देम. दैट इज ऑल्सो पुअरली डिस्ट्रीब्यूटेड. सो रिमेंबर, लैंड एलिनेशन इज नॉट जस्ट अबाउट लूजिंग दिस लैंड, इट इज ऑल्सो अबाउट लूजिंग योर लाइवलीहुड, योर आइडेंटिटी, योर कल्चर, ठीक है, योर सिक्योरिटी, योर एवरीथिंग. What are the remedial steps? ठीक है, we talked about this. Can something be done? Yes. First, experts realized that laws alone were insufficient. ठीक है, there was the Scheduled Areas and Scheduled Tribes Commission in 1961, okay, which suggested that we need strong protection. ठीक है, we cannot just have it as any other kind of land. ठीक है, tribals and tribal land, okay, those kind of areas, they need stronger protection. They recommended that we should have this careful scrutiny, मतलब checking of all the laws. Okay, so far as in those kind of areas. उसके लिए Schedule 5, Schedule 6, उसके कुछ provisions वगैरह हैं and some specific things. We'll study those also, but polity में भी आप पढ़ोगे, but we'll study in little more detail. ठीक है, they also suggested that non-tribals should not freely enter the, these areas and enter into the land का contracts. So that smiling neighbor of yours, the money lender, he cannot just come and say कि ये देखो, इसको sign करो. ठीक है, there has to be official permission before you can get into this. Why so? Because to reduce that cheating. ठीक है, to protect tribal ownership. If you go to a government credit card society, by afternoon you will end up in एक हफ्ते में you will reach the money lender. ठीक है, money lender को land जा रहा है. ठीक है, so it cannot be prevented. So you need to have some kind of like official scrutiny चाहिए. Okay, so are you allowed to do it and so on. Then you have this legislative act में अगर आप देखोगे, there is Forest Rights Act that we talked about. This law basically changed conservation, what it means to conserve. Tribal people were often, post this British in the last 100 years, we started looking at them not as the conservationists, we started looking at them as encroachers. Illegally occupy कर रहे हो, illegally आपने वो ट्री को प्लांट किया है. ठीक है, illegally आपने ये किया वो किया. So Forest Rights Act, it is, we'll study that also. It asks a different kind of question. What if they were here first? ठीक है, were you here first? Looks like you are. So this act is recognizing आपका historical occupation of this land and forest. ठीक है, and you as a community, you have certain kind of rights that you used to have. ठीक है, just to collect your minor forest produce, not to basically see we are not okay with them collecting leaves and other kind of things. ठीक है, whatever they need, but we give permission to people to cut trees. You understand, no? There is also habitat rights for PVTs, particularly vulnerable tribal groups. Okay, there is protection when it comes to, like you have certain kind of protection that you cannot be unfairly evicted. Okay, it became one of the most important kind of tribal welfare laws. Okay, so it's a very important kind of thing. You also have a Chota Nagpur Tenancy Act. Okay, certain other kind of acts. Like for example, what is Chota Nagpur Tenancy Act? Now imagine that there is a businessman who wants to buy your ancestral land. Okay, the Chota Nagpur Tenancy Act जो है 1908 में, it says not so easily. ठीक है, just because you want land does not mean that you can basically buy up hundreds of hectares of land and so on. ठीक है, it is restricting the transfer of this tribal land to non-tribals. Okay, because of many Ramus have suffered from that smiling moneylender. It protects the communities across large parts of Jharkhand. Without such laws, ये land transfer would have become even easier and would have मतलब और भी lost हो चुका होगा. ठीक है, and when did we bring this? 1908. उसी समय से we are trying to protect. ठीक है, and still the situation is not so great. Santal Paragana Act, okay, Pargana Act. ठीक है, so this act again provides for see it's like another layer of protection, right? It prevents that easy transfer of tribal land नहीं होना चाहिए. ठीक है, intention अच्छा है, noble है, to protect your tribal उनके identity, to protect their livelihoods and so on. But many anthropologists scholars basically argue that ये strict restrictions जो है, it also slows down आपके infrastructure projects. ठीक है, आपके schools, आपके hospitals and so on. So policy makers, you know, they're trying to balance this. ठीक है, protection करना है कि development करना है. So it's always that kind of a tussle. ठीक है, some groups are saying कि development, yes. ठीक है, development ही चाहिए and so on. The other group is like conservation. Look at all the Ramus that have suffered and so on. So overall, if you see, okay, land alienation is definitely a big problem. Okay, we have to go back to Ramu. Okay, you should always remember Ramu. Okay, until you write your mains, you should remember Ramu and Ramus. Okay, he borrowed only, what was it, 50,000 we said? Yeah, 1 lakh. Okay, he lost his land. Then more land. Okay, he lost his, it's not really about his land, he lost his dignity, he lost his future. Okay, today India has better laws, we have better policies, we have better awareness and so on. You know, but there is one lesson that remains unchanged. Good laws cannot help without good implementation from you, future administrators. Remember this sentence. Land is not just an asset to them. Tribal communities are very different. Land is life. Land is identity. Land to them is their culture. Land to them is their memory. You understand, na? Okay? If you protect only the forest, but not the people of that particular forest, you are going to lose both. So many of these studies have actually shown us this. The real solution is not choosing between development and tribal rights. The actual solution has to be that you are achieving both of them. So यहाँ पे the takeaway is, whenever you hear land alienation, you have to think beyond loss of land. Okay? It is not just loss of land, and if you are writing only loss of land, you've missed the picture. You have to think about loss of their home, loss of their identity, loss of their culture, loss of their livelihood, loss of their sacred areas, their temples. Okay? That is why anthropologists call this as the heart of tribal issues. Everything from here is because of this. So we are reading about the gravity of this thing, tribals being inside the forests, unka importance in the forest, being such a novice at our stage, then how come the government with such experienced anthropologists doesn't believe in conservation of forest with the tribals and not without them? So that's a good question. They kind of know it. Okay, you know, we have great laws, okay, but not necessarily the best implementation. Okay, and second thing is, outside of anthropology, a lot of people don't give this much importance. Take a loss of land is only seen as a loss of land. Take a, you know that it is not just loss of land, it's a loss of many things put together. Take a, but for them, land for land. Take a, ye liya, wo le lo. You get the picture, right? It's a very different kind of a mindset. So we've got to sort of work on ensuring that, you know, it's got true, this thing goes. Good question. So can we say the concept, this is Sampriti, okay, can we say the concept of development is subjective? If so, how do we decide which is the correct way of going forward with development? Something that's development for the country is a setback for tribal communities. How do we reach the fine line here? That is a very good question, for which you'll have to wait for a few more days. Okay, let's see all the problems first. Okay, wherein then we say, you know, the tribal interest and the nation's interest are aligned. Okay, I cannot be the person who is benefiter of the progress, and you, the Ramus, okay, are going to be the victims of progress. That cannot be development. Okay, you have to ensure that we are kind of aligned. Okay, fine line here. Good question. Last May 6, 7, 8, 9. This is your tribal ka. 9th wala chapter is about development. Okay, developmental anthropology related topics. Good questions. Okay, which tribe fought against mining in Niyamgiri? What is the answer? What is the answer? Dongriya Khond, C. Okay, Balco mining displaced many of which kind of families was it? Okay, it is the Baiga families. We talked about this. Right, Kanha Tiger Reserve is linked with the relocation of which particular groups? Okay, you should know this. Baiga and Gond, we talked about this. Which tribe became successful, you know, a conservation kind of a model ke liye that I basically talked about? It is a Sholiga tribe. We'll see them, okay, and then, you know, Chota Nagpur Tenancy Act, mainly what? Does it promote mining? Does it restrict tribal land transfer? Does it encourage urbanization? Abolish forest? What exactly was it for? Okay, it's a form, it restricts the tribal land transfer in easy, without any control kind of a manner. Is this clear? Okay, so this is that. Not very easy, okay, you know, I'm going to ask you some factual questions because I will try to ensure that you're not getting, you know, all 100%. Okay, but you can tell me. Okay, let's see. I'll get an idea of who's paying a lot of attention. Okay, so now we have actually seen land alienation ka problem. Now we'll take a look at what is poverty and poverty related issues. Okay. By the way, if you look at this, land alienation is the beginning. Usi ke karan you basically go into poverty. Usi ke karan you basically go into indebtedness. So please don't think that these are separate topics that are like completely different from each other. Okay, they are all interrelated kind of problems. Everything basically starts because of this, and then these things follow. ठीक है. It's only because वो land alienation हो रहा है and they are having to go and live in another place. वहाँ पे the kind of literacy they don't have it. But in that particular forest, they are the PhDs. They are the doctorates. They are the researchers. They are the scholars. They are the everything. ठीक है. But in this world, ठीक है, they don't have any kind of directly transferable kind of skills. Is this clear? ठीक है. So this is the main. So you'll see a lot of overlap here. So what about poverty? See, when you look at poverty, right? Again, imagine, Ramu, ठीक है, you're born inside the forest, your home is the jungle. ठीक है. The market जो आपका है या shop जो है, it is basically your forest. Your hospital is your forest. The school is your forest. The bank is your forest. Everything essentially comes from nature. You own very little money. Cash, actual cash wala thing is very less. But you own something that most people just don't have. It's priceless. You can't put a price to it. You own your own freedom. Is this clear? You can collect honey whenever you want. Okay, you can collect fruits whenever you want. You can take firewood whenever you want. Okay, you don't have too much of, materialist needs. Okay, you don't have, one second. You don't have much of this material needs. And because you don't have much of this material needs, you're very happy in whatever kind of resource that you're essentially able to get. Okay, it's a different kind of a lifestyle. So when we are saying that they're happy and you own freedom does not mean that money has bought you that freedom. Okay, you're not the kind of a person who requires money to be, free. Right? It's a very different kind of a mindset. Who's the originally happy wala group? Okay, it is, they used to be. They used to be when they used to be in the forest, in their traditional lifestyle and so on. But things, of course, have changed. Okay? And again, so you go back to that, you're owning some small patch of land inside that particular forest, jahan pe aap grow karte ho, you hunt some small animals, and you fish in the streams that are available or some pond there, lake there, whatever it is. Nobody feels very rich, neither does anybody feel very poor as well. Relative inequality बहुत कम है और relative equality ज़्यादा है. Life is simple, but वो meaningful life है. You're happy. Now imagine that somebody essentially comes and says कि हटो. Somebody is coming and saying we are going to remove you because you cannot enter this particular forest anymore. Paper says so. Okay, this is my document that says. And suddenly everything has changed. आपका food गया, आपका livelihood गया, आपका identity गया, आपका culture गया, आपका sacred everything गया. This is where the tribal poverty started. And again, remember this carefully. Okay, for many tribes, poverty is not just lack of money. Okay, it is basically loss of, or I should say, it is also the loss of land. It's also the loss of forest. It's a loss of dignity. कोई self-respect नहीं है. You're एक वेज लेबर बनोगे बहुत मुश्किल का लाइफ हो जाता है लिविंग दैट काइंड ऑफ लाइफ एंड दिस काइंड लाइफ इज दैट इज व्हाई लैंड एलिनेशन जो है इट नेचुरली लीड्स टू योर सेकंड प्रॉब्लम दैट इज योर पॉवर्टी का प्रॉब्लम. ठीक है. व्हाई आर द ट्राइब्स सो पुअर? राइट? यू आस्क दिस काइंड ऑफ क्वेश्चन. इज इट बिकॉज दे आर नॉट ट्राइंग? इट इज नॉट बिकॉज दे आर नॉट ट्राइंग. ठीक है. Many tribes still live in this acute poverty, very severe degree of poverty. Why do they live in this kind of poverty? Because they depend heavily on natural resources. Okay, they depended on your forest ka resources. Okay, now the forest is gone. And unke economy mein they never had a surplus kind of an economy. Today you're supposed to have a surplus kind of economy, meaning you are able to, whatever aapka daily life ke liye jo chahiye wo use kar liya, uske baad you have something to save for tomorrow. That is our life. Unka aisa nahi hai. They don't want, it's a subsistence based economy tha. Today, subsistence ke baad also, the subsistence itself is very difficult. People actually produced mainly us samay, for their own kind of just bare survival. Okay, not because they want to earn some kind of profit or something. Yesterday I showed you those pictures, Jarawa tribe, if you see. Okay, did they ever need a shop? Okay, the forest was their supermarket, was their shop. Okay, if you think of the Bega tribe, take a Bega, beautiful clothes and all, decoration, all those things you've seen. Okay, small fields the. Okay, but the forests around them was large. Now imagine that they lose those kind of forests. Where will they go? Most of them have had to move to the towns or the fringes of the forest, the edges of the forest. ठीक है, and that is where that market economy का वो touch आता है. पहले तो what would they do? They basically depend on reciprocity. I give you something, you give me something. ठीक है, आज नहीं तो कल, whatever. But now everything is based on cash and interest and those kind of things. ठीक है, earlier the food was coming from your forest. Now it has to be purchased somewhere by giving them money. ठीक है, so earlier nobody had to borrow money. That concept was never there. But today तो anything that you want loan, go to that smiley neighbor of yours. ठीक है. Nobody hired labor. ठीक है, अगर आपको कुछ चाहिए, घर बनाना है, बैम्बू लगाना है, फेंसिंग बनाना है, आपको कृषि करना है, ठीक है, it doesn't matter. ठीक है, you basically bring your इर्द गिर्द के लोग. Today, you have to need money, daily wage. You can't even afford daily wage. you are the daily wage labor. ठीक है, many of them have become construction laborers in many of these cities. कौन काम कर रहे हैं यहाँ पे? It is many of these tribals. This brick kilns and all you have seen, वहाँ पे bonded labor वगैरह जो होते हैं, who do you think is working there? ठीक है, it is it's the tribes. ठीक है. Some migrate to the cities, मतलब not the kind of cities that you and I think of, ठीक है. They basically मतलब इतना low wage में, ठीक है, slave का life ही जीते हैं. Another problem also appears. Many of these tribal communities, they basically use very simple technology, so low productive होता है, less income होते हैं. So मतलब वो poverty is not just poverty, it is like persistent poverty. ठीक है, because less income always. That is why many tribal families में if you see, they continue to be under आपका BPL, BPL का status, below poverty line का status, however it is defined. ठीक है, and the problem is not that they are not trying. Okay, for somebody else it might be कि मतलब you know why not they go, मतलब जो है, it's not laziness का problem. It is the loss of the resource. It's the loss of the kind of life that they had. If you look at the poverty, of course, let's take a look at the magnitude of the poverty. Magnitude of the poverty, अगर आप देखोगे, you can see some statistics here. There is a decline from 62.3%. Okay, so about 62.3% of the rural tribal people actually live below poverty. And later that has actually been brought to 45.3, depending upon how you define poverty. Urban poverty, it actually went from your 35 something change wala percent all the way to 24 kind of percent. So is everything fine? Would decrease हो रहा है? No, it is not fine. ठीक है, the numbers, overall numbers are going to improve because more people are coming into this market economy. ठीक है, they are basically coming into मतलब daily wage kind of thing. ठीक है, but the percentage is still extremely high compared to every other social group in the country. ठीक है, 1 out of every 2, meaning 50% of the rural tribal persons, ठीक है, they still remain below poverty line. It's not just poor, seriously poor. ठीक है, if you look at the example, okay, of a place in Attapadi. Attapadi is a place, it is in Kerala. ठीक है, Kerala is a well-developed state, socially developed state. ठीक है, but वहाँ पे you have tribes, उनका socio-economic indicators उठा के देखोगे, it is the second worst country amongst all countries. For a state that has very good socio-economic indicators, some groups have been left so far behind. If it was a country in itself, it has the socio-economic indicators of the second last, in that entire list of countries. Okay, many tribal children जो है, they suffered malnutrition, extreme malnutrition, poor kind of nutrition and so on. So many children died here. So this teaches you an important lesson, right? Poverty is not just low income. It means poor nutrition, it means poor healthcare, it means poor sanitation, it means poor education, everything. So today, experts are increasingly looking at poverty, or at least we are arguing that poverty should not be looked upon only as कि मतलब आपका कि how much of money per day is available, but you should look at it as multi-dimensional poverty, which essentially means many dimensions of deprivation. ठीक है, there is not only monetary deprivation, there is many dimensions of deprivations all coming together, not only income. So that will give you a much better picture, and ऐसे देखोगे, it will be even worse than these kind of numbers. Do you guys know what these are? Why do they have? Is it because they have a full belly? It is not. Okay, it is not. Okay, when kids have this malnutrition, biological anthropy, एक बार देखेंगे, ठीक है, you will see this. In India, 5 out of 6, who are multidimensionally poor are from lower tribes or castes. ठीक है, it's a United Nations report. Okay, United Nations report basically made an important sort of observation that it said कि इंडिया में 5 out of every 6 multidimensionally poor जो है, people belong to either the scheduled caste or they belong to scheduled tribes. ठीक है, 2 different groups but very different kind of reasons for this multidimensional poverty in them. And 5 out of 6 is it's a striking number. ठीक है, remember scheduled tribes जो है, they form only, let's say, 9% of your Indian population, yet they contribute disproportionately high numbers to poverty. Why? Because वो deprivation जो है, it is a historical thing. It accumulates over many generations, right? If your grandparents have lost the land, ठीक है, your parents will remain poor, the children, मतलब begin their life poor, and it basically becomes a cycle of poverty. Very, very difficult to sort of get out of it. So breaking that cycle, not easy. ठीक है, extremely difficult. Tribal poverty, वो मतलब it's not just accidental poverty नहीं, it's deeply connected to मतलब हमारे history, the history of the British coming, the Indian population or the Indian new government that came in, that also basically continued with the same kind of policies and so on. ठीक है, and in fact there is an important scholar, okay, who explained it beautifully. His name is B.D. Sharma. ठीक है, B.D. Sharma was an IAS officer. Okay. He's an IAS officer, or he was an IAS officer, and later he became one of India's what do you call it? Like, he became one of India's greatest tribal rights ka champion. ठीक है? And in fact, he also played a very important role in kind of shaping what became the Forest Rights Act that we talk about now. He contributed to PISA, Panchayat Extension to Scheduled Areas of 1996. He guided the मतलब Bhuria Commission के लिए. He believed that tribal poverty basically has multiple layers. ठीक है, and the first one is going to be the loss of resource का rights. If you're a tribal member, ठीक है, and you're living beside a river, and suddenly, you know, let's say a dam is being built, or any of the kind of other things that we talked about, you know, in a moment, you know, the village is going to disappear. And this has happened many times. Narmada का project अगर आप देखोगे, ठीक है, it has happened many different times. Thousands of tribal families will actually get displaced, and the number is actually not thousands, it even becomes millions, it becomes lakhs. Second thing is that people actually lose their means of production. Means of production का मतलब है the ways of earning, because the ways of earning used to be forest. Without their land, many end up having only one particular option, that is to become a wage labor. Agricultural area में है, rural area में है तो agri labor, या they become your industry, मतलब town को जाना है तो मतलब they become the industrial labor. ठीक है, and the worst part is many of them end up becoming bonded labor. ठीक है, bonded labor. A heartbreaking example, if you can see, it comes from you know, this particular article, you know, and these are, you'll see many of these kind of articles, right? They become bonded laborers, right? A tribal mother borrowed 15,000 rupees apparently, ठीक है, and she was unable to repay 15,000. कहाँ से pay करेंगे 15,000? Her young son was taken away as collateral. So literally, security for a loan has gotten to this particular point कि मतलब I don't have any security to give you, mortgage करने के लिए कुछ है नहीं, you take my child. ठीक है, this shows कि how poverty can destroy, मतलब कितना destruction हो चुका है, and again the next generation का childhood is getting destroyed. Okay, and so on. Okay, third one is denial of due installment of labor. So meaning workers receive unfair wages. Even if you have done something, you're not getting anything for it. For example, Adivasi tea workers, अगर आप देखोगे, we saw them yesterday, right? They receive far lower wages than you know, others who are doing the same kind of work. ठीक है, मतलब tribe हो कितना चाहिए, ठीक है, और कुछ option नहीं है ना, तो बैठो करो. Okay, and so on. The fourth one is you know, bartering of liberty. You're literally bartering your own liberty. People lose their freedom. You know, anything that you want abhi ke liye, right? You are essentially, matlab, you saw that mortgage ke liye, right? So you don't even have land. So what are you mortgaging? You're mortgaging yourself, your personal freedom. Human trafficking सबसे ज़्यादा कहाँ पे है? These kind of tribal areas में. ठीक है, forced labor, bonded labor कहाँ पे सबसे ज़्यादा है? Tribal areas में. Exploitation of tribal women, you know, physically, emotionally, you know, and even sexually कहाँ पे होते हैं? Tribal women होते हैं वो. So all of these things are very tragic realities, but these are realities. And finally, if you see, right, you know, psychological state of accepting deprivation and destitutions and demise of self-respect and dignity. What does that even mean? ठीक है, people actually begin accepting कि मतलब poverty is the normal thing. ठीक है, that's the most dangerous deprivation. ठीक है, literally you have conquered their minds. This is our lives. Somehow let's just be done with it. ठीक है, it has destroyed their hope, it has destroyed their self-respect, it has destroyed their confidence, ठीक है, it has broken them mentally, psychologically, emotionally. Okay? See, true poverty जो है ना, it is not only money. Of course, it's multidimensional, but true poverty is when all hope is gone. When you have no hope whatsoever, ठीक है, that is उससे कम poverty, मतलब उससे ज़्यादा poverty कभी नहीं हो सकता. ठीक है? Next, other factors that are responsible for poverty. What could be the other factors? See, so far we saw poverty begins with loss of land. True. Okay, but unfortunately the story does not end there. बहुत सारे factors होते हैं that keep the tribes poor. पहला वाला we saw, you know, that money lender का thing, right? So Ramu basically needs 10,000 rupees. You know, maybe someone has fallen sick. ठीक है, maybe the crops have failed. Maybe there is some kind of a wedding या कुछ है. ठीक है, a money lender is very quick to show up. आपको वहाँ पे जाना भी नहीं है. He knows किसका क्या ज़रूरत है, आवश्यकता कहाँ पे है, and then he'll be there, and then, you know, the interest सब कह के extremely high. ठीक है, the family cannot repay, and finally, you know, they lose their, you know, the only thing that they have, that is land. ठीक है, and many of them have to move to places जहाँ पे मतलब वो rocky है, dry है, मतलब, you know, fertile नहीं है. Some actually lose everything. ठीक है, they become that daily wage labor, as I told you. So cycle देखो, you took a loan because necessity. That loan became your मतलब debt plus your interest, your मतलब that essentially became your land का loss eventually, and land का loss becomes your poverty. The second factor is your developmental projects and so on. ठीक है, again, see, as we said, right, India needs roads. ठीक है, and good roads at that. ठीक है, India needs dams, India needs mines, industries, all of those. But the question again is simple: development for whom and at what cost for whom? The benefit goes to somebody else, you and me, who can drive, you know, on those, and the benefit and the cost basically goes to somebody else. Benefits to you and me, and the cost to the tribes. Many projects that are there were conveniently built on tribal lands. ठीक है, उनके ancestral lands है, उनके family के land है, ठीक है, उनके sacred lands है. Okay, and they never got this thing called as rehabilitation. Okay, delayed है, प्रॉपरली रिसीव नहीं है, मतलब पेपर वर्क, ऑल दीज काइंड ऑफ थिंग्स के कारण उनको नहीं मिला. So they lost their forest, they lost their water, they lost their livelihood, they lost many things. That is why many tribal movements demand development karo, but development fairly, development with justice, not just development. Is this clear? You can take a look at this. Right? We can live without power, but we cannot live without land. Don't destroy our cultural knowledge base. Everything goes if that happens. Systemic barriers to economic and social mobility as well. Okay, there are other causes. See, systemic barriers means these are deep rooted hurdles and obstacles in their thing, not easy to overcome. And these are barriers that are not created overnight. They've continued for decades. Some even pre-independence. Many tribal villages में अगर आप देखोगे, they're so remote, schools are far away, नहीं जा पाएंगे, ठीक है, hospitals are so far away, roads are so poor, internet is kind of weak, jobs are limited. Right? So most of these children end up leaving school early, and without education वो क्या करेंगे? Good employment becomes difficult. Without employment, poverty is going to continue. So already your grandfather has lost your land. Okay, the father has basically struggled with this thing, and the next generation is also going to be part of this cycle of poverty. So, but we are trying to do some things with it. For example, we have this PM Janman. Okay, the full form is Pradhan Mantri. Janjati Adivasi Nyaya. Okay, Nyaya Mahabhiyan. Okay, so this is basically what it is. Okay, PM Janman. It is a program that is especially focused on PVTGs, and you guys know what is a PVTG. PVTG is like, let's say you have the entire tribal communities. Within this, there is 70 something odd, most vulnerable groups, particularly vulnerable tribal groups. Okay, and इसमें what we are trying to do is that we are trying to improve their roads and build some आंगनवाड़ीज in those kind of areas. ठीक है, कुछ स्कूल के हॉस्टल्स के लिए होने चाहिए, some mobile medical units वगैरह के लिए होनी चाहिए, ड्रिंकिंग वाटर होना चाहिए, इलेक्ट्रिसिटी होना चाहिए. ठीक है, it is supporting another kind of a program which is called as बंधन विकास केंद्रास. ठीक है, मीनिंग ओवरऑल लाइवलीहुड अपॉर्चुनिटीज को हमें इंप्रूव करना है एंड सो ऑन. बट वी हैव मेनी ऑफ दीज काइंड ऑफ प्रोग्राम्स, ग्रेट प्रोग्राम्स, बट यू शुड नो देम ऑफ कोर्स. ओके, ग्रेट प्रोग्राम्स, ग्रेट पॉलिसीज, ग्रेट लॉज. What is not so good? It is going to be your implementation of these. ठीक है, see, think of it like this: a child cannot study well without a school, without electricity, without proper nutrition. So development must, happen. All of these things should basically come together. Not just school. School में खाना भी होना चाहिए, roads भी होने चाहिए ताकि वहाँ जा पाए. ठीक है, there should be electricity, there should be a bathroom there. ठीक है, and things like that. Lack of access to quality education and healthcare. Right? So this is also another thing. Education is again very, very important. It is one of the strongest weapons against poverty. Okay? Many tribal children जो है, they still struggle in many ways because the schools are far away. And even if you go so far away and reach that particular school, the teachers may be absent. It's a real story. Language becomes another kind of barrier because even if the teacher is there and they're speaking in some kind of a language that students are not able to understand, that's also a problem because children speak a different language. We have Article 350A, B, ये सब हम कहते हैं, ठीक है, but school में हिंदी होगा या English होगा, and that is not the language that they speak. Learning becomes difficult. What they speak becomes very difficult to kind of comprehend. ठीक है, many places में healthcare also have similar kind of problem. No nearby kind of hospitals. ठीक है, emergency treatment वगैरह नहीं है. It's only emergency है तो it means death. Pregnant women, उनको it is very, very difficult because उनका MMR is relatively high because to वो pain आने से and by the time you reach any kind of institutional delivery के लिए it does not happen. ठीक है, so poor health also has problems, right? It does not enable you to work properly. ठीक है, it lowers your income. So to improve your education, ठीक है, the government has actually brought in this Ekalavya model residential schools. It used to be on my cycling route, and I've gone through these routes so many times, but I never thought कि ये क्या है. ठीक है, बचपन में. Okay, and these are basically these kind of schools that are meant to provide quality education specifically for your ST students. Eklavya, he was from the forest and he was deeply talented. वो वाला से they have actually brought in this kind of a name. Okay, quite good. Students here receive hostel के benefits and they basically encourage sports and other kind of skills and things like this as well. And इस schools में there is a specific feature which is जो हमारे school में जो है we are so ignorant about tribal art, tribal culture, tribal history, tribal leaders, tribal, when did you hear Birsa Munda for the very first time? Okay? So you get the picture, right? So they basically learn, their own cultural importance as well, their own kind of history and things like that. Each school can accommodate approximately 480 students. Okay, do they all accommodate 480 students? Different thing. Okay. Recently, there was several new EMRs were kind of inaugurated. There is many more under construction and so on. The idea बहुत simple है. Good education जो है, it can create better opportunities. Let's say a decade or two later. Okay, so be aware of all of these. Okay, so if you look at this, launch of Dharti Aba Janjatiya Gram Utkarsh Abhiyan. These terms are a little difficult for me, primarily because I don't understand. Okay, the Hindi as well. Okay, but this was something that was launched on Mahatma Gandhi's birthday, 2024, couple of years ago, right? So this program was supposed to cover 63,000 tribal villages, right? It can benefit more than 5 crore tribal tribal members, tribal people, and so on. Okay, and it is actually sort of bringing in 17 different kind of ministries together. Okay, so meaning it is a different sort of ministries coming together, a broad kind of focus. Health hona chahiye, education hona chahiye, livelihood hona chahiye, infrastructure hona chahiye, skill development hona chahiye, and so on. So matlab, it's kind of important, right? The government is no longer seeing tribal poverty, as a primarily as a money ka problem, income ka problem. It is basically looking at it as a proper developmental issue. Okay? And one lesson is something that you can gain from your schemes alone cannot be sufficient. They should have awareness and they should have rights. The rights must be able to reach the people. Okay? Benefits jo hai, it must actually reach the villages. So not only in policy, but also when it comes to implementation, like outcome based hona chahiye. Like you should be able to see, what, this is how it started 5 years ago. Look at this particular village today. This is how this tribal family lived, certain time period, but look at it now. Okay? And the tribes, the tribal families, they were happily living inside the forest. That's how they were. Okay, we won't call them rich, but to them they are rich. They had the land, they had the culture, they had the community, they had their kinship, they had relatives, they had dignity, everything was there. But gradually, a lot of these things were lost. So the solution has to be to bring back those rights to them, restore those rights back to them, improve their education for the, the modern world, strengthen the kind of healthcare that is there. कैसे करेंगे वो भी हम देखेंगे. Livelihoods create करो, forest को protect करो, उनको forest में rights दो, and ensure that these tribes actually become partners in development and not victims of development. That becomes important. It cannot be that we gain the benefits and they get all the costs. Okay? So, tribal communities के लिए understand this. Poverty जो है, it is not merely कि मतलब it is a lack of certain amount of money से कम money. ठीक है, ऐसा नहीं है. It is loss of land, it is loss of livelihood, it is loss of their identity, it is loss of their culture, it is loss मतलब उनका backbone आप break कर रहे हो. Psychologically, morally, emotionally and so on. So it's a holistically you have to take a look at these. Okay? Implementation has to be much better. Take a look at this, guys. Tribal poverty mainly begins with what? Is it urbanization? Is it loss of land and forest? Is it tourism? Is it industrialization? What is the right answer here? Okay? The answer is, the root cause agar aap dekhoge, it doesn't mean that the others have not caused it, but it's the loss of land and forest for them. So Attapadi became well known because of what? Okay? Is it because of gold mining? Is it because of malnutrition? Is it because of silk industry? Is it because of tourism? Okay? It is malnutrition and deaths. Okay? B.D. Sharma ji, was famous for what? Okay? He was a very important IAS officer, but he became much more involved, especially so far as tribal rights are concerned, even after retiring. Okay? And that is that. And then, P.N. Janman, right? So it mainly focuses on what? Okay? Is it, which one is it? PM German is specifically meant for your PBTGs, particularly vulnerable tribal groups. EMR stands for Ekalavya, right? So it is Ekalavya, the word. If you get Ekalavya, then you basically get the, I guess, you have two options. Modern research systems or model residential schools. It is model residential schools. Is this clear? Tribal education ke liye hai ye. Okay, there's a question here. How do they mortgage their land essentially? If... Oh, I just lost the question. Who was it? Just ask me the question. Just tell me once again. But from what I understood about that particular question, right? Okay, the question was asking ki patta related issues. Okay, how does it happen? Okay, if the tribes essentially don't have papers of the forest, then how are they basically mortgaging it? To the money lenders and so on. Three broad situations here I can think of. Okay, but again, we'll go through this a little later. Okay, the whole we have to look through the policies and rehab, what all is required and so on. See, pehle wala ye patta jo hai legally owned land ka. Okay, some tribal families basically have legal rights or the patta to their agricultural land or whatever kind of land they have, and this land can be mortgaged. Sometimes they don't have the patta. Okay, but money lenders know that the land is actually theirs. So if we can create something, and say that we have taken that as a collateral to give them that kind of money, okay, then that land is technically ours because, land relation successful hai. There is also some forest land for which they have kind of access, but they don't have a formal title yet. Okay? And the kind of land that they've been cultivating till now, they just know ki but there is something about legal ownership and things like this. Okay? And so on. And sometimes some of this kind of land cannot be legally sold or it cannot be mortgaged because, certain kind of laws and all are there. बट एक्सप्लॉयटेशन स्टिल होता है. मनी लेंडर्स विल डू व्हाट, दे विल बेसिकली टेक दिस ब्लैंक साइंड पेपर्स वगैरह, यू नो अंडरस्टैंड राइट. सो मतलब ब्लैंक पेपर में आपको अंगूठा मतलब थंब इंप्रेशन वगैरह लगाना है, ठीक है. देन यू नो दे माइट एंड अप सीजिंग वट एवर काइंड ऑफ स्टैंडिंग क्रॉप है, या वहाँ पे जो भी लाइफ स्टॉक है, ठीक है. एनी काइंड ऑफ फ्यूचर इनकम ऑन दिस पर्टिकुलर लैंड इज बेसिकली माइन एंड सो ऑन. यू गेट द पिक्चर राइट. सो दिस काइंड ऑफ थिंग्स कैन हैपन. दैट इज व्हाई फॉरेस्ट राइट्स एक्ट बिकेम काइंड ऑफ इंपॉर्टेंट. देन देयर इज लैंड दैट इज सपोज टू बी कस्टमरी लैंड या आपका कम्युनिटी लैंड एंड सो ऑन. मतलब इट इज लैंड दैट इज बिलीव टू बिलोंग टू दिस एंटायर विलेज और कम्युनिटी टेक्निकली, ठीक है. स्पेशली व्हेन इट कम्स टू योर नॉर्थ ईस्ट वगैरह आप देखोगे, an individual does not have the legal right to mortgage it, but outsiders again find ways to sort of capture these things through either fraud, through fake records, through encroachment, ठीक है, through they have the ability to manipulate the land का surveys and so on. So you get the picture, right? So मतलब ऐसे बहुत सारे चीजें हैं, मतलब you can go into much more of these kind of technicalities and so on. Understood? Next is indebtedness. Who has to repay it now? ठीक है, you have to repay it now because it is Ramu your paid. ठीक है, even after Ramu के बाद also the children will continue paying all of those. When the previous generation का debt is being paid by this particular generation, we call it as what? Intergenerational debt. ठीक है, हमारे में उतना होता uncommon है, but वहाँ पे almost every single person में they are paying generational debt, intergenerational debt for multiple generations. Many tribal families have, this is their reality. ठीक है, indebtedness is the third problem, the most important kind of problem, और मतलब it is all interrelated. They are being trapped by debt. ठीक है, because the debt is just too large to pay in anyone's lifetime. It just cannot be paid. ठीक है, एक ग्राफ लगा के देखो कंपाउंड इंटरेस्ट बोल के, एंड इवन इफ दैट पर्सन इज नॉट अ फ्रॉड, एंड वो सब फ्रॉड करते हैं, ठीक है. मतलब द मनी हैज बेसिकली इंक्रीज टू सो एंड सो काइंड अमाउंट, दे कैन नॉट कैलकुलेट एंड सी वेदर इट इज राइट. ओके सर, ये वाला पीटीआर पे 100 नहीं चलेगा, वो आप ई टू द पावर एक्स वगैरह आपको करना पड़ेगा. इट इज मतलब इस टाइप का व्हाट कैन दे डू. ठीक है, सो फॉर मेनी ट्राइब्स दिस इज नॉट 1 year का प्रॉब्लम, दिस इज अ प्रॉब्लम ऑफ मल्टीपल जनरेशंस. ठीक है, why do tribes borrow money? Is it because they're not working enough? They're not basically sort of like trying hard enough? It is not that at all. Most borrow because that is the only way. They're already very poor. ठीक है, is when that change happened, right? You studied land alienation, you studied poverty. ठीक है, so what is that? ठीक है, it is all, the poor family has become poor because of this new change that has taken place. ठीक है, and they have to borrow. They need cash, money lenders. Slowly the debt will increase. ठीक है, then they lose their land, they lose their freedom, they lose their dignity, they lose their identity. So it's like land loss to poverty, poverty to आपका debt trap or indebtedness. Many non-tribal money lenders जो है, they entered the tribal areas primarily for this. It's easy money. It is easy assets. ठीक है, they offer these easy loans. And money lenders, I'm telling you कि मतलब the equivalent of मतलब 1,000 crores के होंगे. All you got to do is you don't have to have any skill. You just say कि मतलब भाई, I'm just going to keep this land. Okay, you pay me, ठीक है, that is fine. ठीक है, but अभी लिख के दे दो. And that is if you're a good guy who's telling them कि हम लेने वाले हैं. ठीक है, and and so on. And the person will be like, why would you, what if you, even if I pay, if you don't give me my land and you say it is your papers, see I give to all you tribals. ठीक है, I don't want to, एक बंदे का why do I care so much? मतलब it will be thousands of crores का equivalent. होता है ये, you understand ना? When the tribals fail to repay, and they will fail to repay because it's just so difficult, the land that was mortgaged, ठीक है, or kept as security was literally मतलब has मतलब changed hands. Okay, money lending became the biggest and the most lucrative kind of industries that are taken place. It's one of the biggest sort of tools for this land alienation. ठीक है, very simple chain है. Loan becomes मतलब I told you right, loan, debt, land loss essentially means loss of everything, lifelong poverty. That is why indebtedness is a serious issue. In fact, if you see so many of these kind of tribes, what are the tribes that you can see here? Let's take a look at some of these tribes. Okay, what are the tribes that you can see? Okay, so can you see Bhils here? Okay, 12 million. Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Gujarat, Karnataka, all those kind of places. Then you have Gonds. Take a Gonds are something that we have already seen. Then you have Santhals, Draupadi Murmuji, right? Where is number 4? I cannot see. Minas, okay, number 4 that you can see here. Take a Rajasthan. Okay, Naikada, okay, in Gujarat and so on. Take a Karnataka, Rajasthan, Gujarat, Daman Diu, Nagar Haveli, Maharashtra, Goa and so on. Okay, you have 4, 5, where is 6? Orowans, right? We have seen the Orowans as well. Okay, then you have what am I missing? 7 is Sugalis in Andhra Pradesh. ठीक है, there are different sort of groups, Lambanis, Lambadas, there are different sort of names, different kind of places. ठीक है, then you go to number 7 हुआ, where is 8? 8 is your Mundas, right? So you know the Mundas, we have seen the Mundas as well. Then you have the Nagas and then you have the Khons. ठीक है, like the Dongriya Khons, right? So you have them as well. So different sort of tribes. Okay, but you know, one story is the same in all of them. Take a land alienation, okay, indebtedness, poverty, सब कुछ है यहाँ पे in all of these kind of tribes. Minas maybe a little less because they are doing exceptionally well, relatively speaking. Even Naiks, you know, of Karnataka, they tend to do well. What is the reason for this kind of indebtedness? Okay, if you look at this kind of indebtedness, you have already seen. Take a loss of land. That's exactly what it is. So they have lost the rights over the forests that used to be their home. Point number 2, jo hai. Right, we have seen this, so I'm not explaining this further because you know this is exactly the same as what we have been seeing there. Okay, then you also see that you know there is this which is going to be poor cultivation methods, right? Because you're going to compare them ki matlab bhai you should do farming like we do it, herbicide and pesticide and this and that, okay? And you have to create surplus and you should do the products that are matlab you know is going to give you money in the market and so on. Not subsistence kind of farming, not rain fed kind of farming, okay? Not this traditional tools, not with these small parcels or land parcels, land holdings, okay? Not with these kind of poor irrigation and so on, okay? Your उनका जो हार्वेस्ट होते हैं इट इज़ जनरली स्मॉल एंड इट इज़ फॉर नो सरप्लस का प्रोसेस है, ठीक है? नो एक्स्ट्रा प्रोड्यूस फॉर द मार्केट. विदाउट सरप्लस क्या है? देयर इज नो सेविंग्स. विदाउट सेविंग्स क्या होगा? वन इलनेस इज ऑल इट टेक्स फॉर यू टू गो टू योर दैट स्माइलिंग नेबर, ठीक है? दैट स्माइलिंग नेबर व्हाई? ठीक है, बिकॉज द मनी लेंडर, ठीक है? थर्ड रीजन इज गोइंग टू बी देयर इज इग्नोरेंस, ठीक है? और यू नो सी इवन बिफोर दिस ना देयर इज लैक ऑफ दिस मार्केट का नॉलेज. आई डोंट नो द मार्केट, ठीक है? I don't know this cash economy. Why cash economy? Why don't we just make something that we are going to consume? ठीक है? And they trust the outsiders like they trust each other, ठीक है? Which is a bad thing, ठीक है? Some traders cheated them, ठीक है? In fact, many traders cheated them. For example, a trader might actually come and say कि you know ये forest produce that you have brought in with you know risking your life and limb, ठीक है? इतना height में जाके इतना अच्छा honey वगैरह लेके, ठीक है? They are going to come and say कि अभी तो मतलब market में तो पता है ना कि मतलब nobody wants honey, ठीक है? बट स्टिल बिकॉज यू केम यू नो यू हैव रिस्क्ड योर लाइफ इन ऑल दैट, 10 रुपए के लिए पूरा ये दे दो, ठीक है? यू नो या 20 रुपए के लिए, 30 रुपए के लिए, एंड दैट पर्सन इज लाइक ओ दे डोंट वांट दिस प्रोडक्ट एट ऑल बट स्टिल ही इज टेकिंग माइंड दिस थिंग एंड गिविंग मी सम मनी, ठीक है? एंड देन गोज एंड टेक्स दैट मनी हैप्पीली एंड गोज एंड वहाँ पे जाके मतलब आपको पता है हनी का प्राइस क्या है? इज लाइक 500 रुपीज, इट इज लाइक 1000 रुपीज. एनीबडी एनी हनी खाने वाले या पीने वाले पीपल, ओके? टेल मी व्हाट इज द ऑनगोइंग काइंड ऑफ प्राइस? सो द फॉरेस्ट प्रोड्यूस दैट इज you know whatever is actual price, you don't get it, like the traders would take it and so on, you know, and again you know very high interest and all these kind of things. The tribals में एक और problem है, they cannot do the math, ठीक है? To a great extent, okay? You know they don't understand this kind of concept. If I give you something, you give me something, that we are considered equal. It cannot be that you know वो time का एक factor है. There is time value of money which has to be sort of factored in, ठीक है? If you tell them the real amount also is fine, but you know the second you say कि मतलब interest है ये है, it becomes very difficult for them to understand. That is why money lenders became very powerful. In fact, there was a study by Rangarajan Committee in 2008. Okay, there's a committee, Rangarajan Committee in 2008, and C. Rangarajan, very famous, you know, and person. He said that approximately 36% of this STK households जो है, they were all indebted, ठीक है? And mostly to informal sources. So even if you're living without you know taking anything from others, ठीक है? Most of the people are borrowing, and they're borrowing from what kind of sources? Informal sources, meaning it is private money lenders, not these government के credit societies and all of that. Because वहाँ पे जाके मतलब you know going in, coming out, it's a very very difficult thing. Major issue है ये. There are more reasons as well. Okay. The wedding ceremonies and things like this, we talked about this, like you know wedding ceremony. Every society basically celebrates their festivals, ठीक है? We do as well. Tribal communities are no different, ठीक है? उनका वेडिंग जो है, उनका मैरिज जो है, इट इज बेसिकली कंसिडर्ड सम इंपॉर्टेंट थिंग. इट्स अ मैटर ऑफ ऑनर, ठीक है? यू नो यू डोंट वांट टू बी द फादर और यू नो द फैमिली मेंबर्स हु आर लाइक कि नहीं हम हमारे मनी सेविंग्स के लिए रख रहे हैं, इसके लिए रख रहे हैं, बट नॉट टू यू नो सेलिब्रेट यू नो वन ऑफ दीज काइंड ऑफ इवेंट्स, ठीक है? उसके लिए वो क्या करेंगे? सो ओके, we will put in everything that we have, and not only that, we will go to that smiling guy, ठीक है? हमारे neighbor money lender, ठीक है? And you know how much ever he's going to give us, we are going to take it, so that we can organize our ceremonies, you know, we can give a feast. They cannot repay. If they cannot repay, what happens? Debt will continue for years, and within a little bit the smiling guy is going to come to you and be like, okay, ठीक है, so this is my parcel of land. The next reason is going to be failure of these government institutional credit, right? We told you banks are often very far away from villages. Take many paperwork is kind of complicated. Many of these tribals actually lack any kind of documents, or they don't have those collateral. Take but the village ka money lender, the smiling guy, the neighbor, take he is ready to give money. Take immediately he's going to pounce on you. Take, don't take from anybody else. Mere se le lo. No forms, no waiting, no questions, nothing. And naturally, people are going to choose the easier option. Okay, if somebody is ill and you need that money, will you go and do the right thing, or will you basically take it from this particular person? You need money, you need to save lives. Okay, unfortunately these kind of easy loans are going to become extremely expensive later. इसके consequences क्या होंगे? Right, there are consequences. Okay, big time consequences. Right, consequences में what happens once the debt increases, when you're not able to repay. First one is going to be your loss of freedom. Loss of freedom का अर्थ क्या है? Sometimes families work only for the moneylender until the moneylender says, you know what, now for whatever money that you owe me, you have repaid me by working. वो लोन कभी फिनिश नहीं होता है. It never finishes. ठीक है, bonded labor, 3 generation, 4 generation, मतलब पूरा generations will be working for this particular guy only for some basic food. Okay, and you will say ki dayavan. Okay, and so on. They lose their land. Okay, alienation of land. Loss of land essentially means what? The land is essentially taken away. So instead of loan repayment, okay, land is basically sort of taken away from them. Third one is going to be sale of girls. Extreme poverty jo hai, it creates many other kind of social problems. In some places what happens is girls have actually been somehow through these outsiders and so on, they've talked them into and they've gotten many of these girls sold into exploitation because of, in order to repay that debt. And what kind of exploitation, okay? Sexual and prostitution, those kind of things. Fourth one is you have, again, these poor living conditions and these kind of jobs that they have to do, it increases disease. What kind of disease? Okay, nutrition poor hai, health care becomes unaffordable, okay, contraception वगैरह कुछ होता नहीं है, and many of them also have to take up, prostitution, other kind of things as well, in order to just make a living. There was a study by V.G. Rao, and this was studying many tribes in and around this region of Madhya Pradesh called as Jabalpur in Madhya Pradesh. Reported a very, very high burden of STDs, which is your sexually transmitted diseases, many different kind of diseases. Okay? So it's showing you ki how poverty and aapka poor health can actually influence each other and reinforce each other. Okay? And the worst consequence is also this bonded labor, forced labor, meaning, people basically work without real freedom. Children have to work, unke children have to work. Okay? Nobody basically gets out from here. Is this clear? Nobody gets out from here. उसके लिए कुछ specific names are there depending upon which tribes that we are talking about, right? So, for example, in a particular tribe, PVTG hai, Saharia tribe, ठीक है, there is a system called as a Hali system, and Juangs, Odisha, ठीक है, Saharias are in Rajasthan and Juangs are in Odisha, very similar systems, but in one place that is called as a Hali system. We are tied to this particular family for very long, and Goti system, the Juangs are basically tied to the moneylenders for many generations. Remember these kind of examples, these are classical examples. Okay, and in fact, some of these tribes we've already seen prior as well. And again, this is like everything put together. Okay, need for money, high interest rate, mortgaging, bondage, right? So we have seen all of these. What could be the legislative and, any kind of steps? How do you basically resolve this kind of problem? You can resolve it only through strong, very, very strong laws that are in their favor. And not only because of these laws and policies, but because we are also having better implementation of these. Many of these things also come under state list. For those of you who have not done your polity, there are certain things that come under the centers list, and then some in the state list, some in the shared list. Several states, so many of these things basically come under the state. Several states have actually passed money lending related laws. So for example, Andhra Pradesh basically came out with something called as the Andhra Pradesh Scheduled Areas Money Lender Regulation Act of 1963. Okay, so that is that. Similarly, you have Mysore ka Pawnbrokers Act in 1961. Assam also you have Money Lending Regulation ka Act in 1968. Okay, there is a 5th schedule. It has its own kind of provisions and so on. So meaning it is something that empowers the state to have the power. You can regulate the money lenders if it is a problem when it comes to those scheduled areas. Scheduled areas are basically your 5th schedule ke areas. So those who have not done your polity, there are 2 areas which is scheduled 5 areas, scheduled 6 areas, jahan pe certain kind of rights hai, and for the tribals, some kind of provisions are there for the tribals. We'll see them in a little later. Okay. In fact, there are some recent efforts also. So this happened in 2019. You can see this, right? Madhya Pradesh government said enough is enough. Okay, and they said ki we are announcing a waiver of all the loans that have been given by these kind of money lenders. That smiling neighbor who is kind of like money lending, unlicensed money lenders jo hai, and if you've gone ahead and given these loans to these people and you're trying to take their land, okay, loan maafi. Kiska loan? Okay, money lender jo aapne bhi diya hai. But of course, it's the thing is you might give 100 rupees and then take, an acre, because it snowballs. or the way you cook up the books as well. It has happened multiple times. So this also shows कि मतलब governments ना, they are recognizing the seriousness of this kind of problem. But it's happening in 2019. It should have happened a long time ago. Remember one thing, making laws is always easier. ठीक है? So these kind of laws are always very good. ठीक है? But will it be implemented? ठीक है? Because you brought a law in your assembly, does that mean that in far away from the capital, ठीक है, there is this tribal member who is working for that moneylender, or whose child is working for that moneylender is going to say, oh, sorry, since 2019, what I'm doing is illegal. It's not the case. Okay? You have to understand implementation is much harder. The real solution has to be, if you have these government credit societies because they need that money and things like this, it has to be accessible. ठीक है, the things should be fairly priced. Land में उनके rights होने चाहिए, forest में उनके rights होने चाहिए, education होना चाहिए, livelihood opportunities होना चाहिए. You cannot just say कि you don't belong to the forest anymore and have given and give them nothing. ठीक है, only then will the tribals be able to stop borrowing just to be able to survive. Is this clear? So remember this thing, right? Land alienation hota hai, it creates poverty. Poverty essentially creates your indebtedness, and indebtedness basically creates so many other kind of problems, like whether it is your bonded labor, loss of land, women-related problems, prostitution, all those kind of things, loss of dignity, completely. So इस cycle को हमें break करना है, ठीक है? Only then real tribal development. वरना वो हमेशा incomplete ही रहेगा. Is this clear? So can we say that all these things are the reasons for rise of Naxalism? In the first picture itself I showed you, all of these things essentially create the left-wing extremism, ethnic conflicts, all of those regionalism, all those kind of issues that come. It's because of these kind of problems that we have that we'll cover today. So 100% right. But how in that particular topic में specifically हम देखेंगे, ठीक है? Okay, let's take a look at the answers. Indebtedness का मतलब क्या है? It means what? Is it having surplus income? Is it being trapped in debt? Is it owning large land? Government subsidy? क्या है ये? ठीक है, of course, it's very simple. It's being trapped in debt. ठीक है, indebtedness. Okay, around 36% of ST farmers' households were indebted mainly due to, mainly to what? Is it your commercial banks? Is it your RBI? Is it your informal sources? Is it your foreign banks? Of course, it is going to be your informal sources. ठीक है, the Hali system is associated with Saharias, Rajasthan में है. Goti system is associated with your Zhuangs, and they are from Odisha. Which scholar reported high indebtedness amongst ST farmer households? Is it Elwin? Is it Gore? Is it Srinivas? Is it your Rangarajan committee? It is Rangarajan committee is what we have seen, but of course he also has talked about this. Which study highlighted poor health amongst indebted tribal populations? It is your VG Rao ka study. Okay, is this clear? Can you please explain the Hali system and Goti system? See, Hali system, Goti system is a traditional kind of a bonded labor kind of arrangement that exists. It is a natural way of their life. ठीक है, हम ऐसे ही हैं. So Hali ke system mein, Saharias will actually serve their masters, whether it is in brick kilns or whether it is in agriculture, whether it is in something else, without any kind of money. Bonded labor, have you heard of it? ठीक है, constitutionally barred है. Laws, statutory bar भी है, but despite that it continues, especially when it comes to the most vulnerable tribal communities. Not everybody देखो, but most vulnerable tribal communities, the whole system in which it operates. SR says all correct. Okay, there are 43 of you who have told me. Okay, hopefully I'll take a look at it later, and see who all have done quite well. Okay, next problem is going to be unemployment, underemployment. Okay, काम है तो भी it is not sufficient kind of thing, right? So we'll take a look at unemployment, underemployment. See, again, if you imagine that you're born into a tribal kind of village, okay, and basic living here, your parents, they'll be farming a small piece of or a small patch of land. Your grandparents must have used the same thing. Your great grandparents must have used. So आपका identity जो है, आपका food जो है, आपका culture जो है, everything essentially comes from that piece of land. Then one day, because of what we have seen so far, the land disappears. Now don't ask me why. Take it one day, one place may it could be a dam, another place may it could be a mine. Mine must have pushed them somewhere else, and that somewhere else may it has become a tiger reserve and so on. Okay? So any kind of skill set that you have, knowledge that you have from that land, it becomes almost useless when you come to outside of this particular forest, and that is where ये वाला story begins. Okay? You will discuss, यहाँ पे unemployment and underemployment यहाँ पे कैसे होते हैं as soon as you essentially go outside of these places. Unemployment, underemployment जो है, of course it is like similar kind of things, but it is different problems to an extent. Unemployment जो है, it means कि no work at all. Underemployment का meaning है कि you are working below your ability, your one's ability. So for example, if you see, there is an educated tribal graduate, ठीक है, that is the most educated member of that particular community. ठीक है, but that member will still be a daily wage laborer. He has a job, daily wage laborer, but his education remains completely unused. That is not unemployment. You will not count that under unemployment. So you should also count underemployment. That is also a problem. So remember this difference. It is frequently kind of seen in our discussions when it comes to tribal societies. Okay? Tribal occupations अगर आप देखोगे, and the fact that the lives and the livelihoods are essentially changing, ठीक है? Before discussing आपका this unemployment and all this, you have to understand something. ठीक है? Many tribes were never unemployed traditionally. They always had some occupation, and most of them used to be in some kind of basic agriculture. ठीक है? And उसके बाद तो industrial laborers बने, some were artisans, some remained as hunters and gatherers, at least for the first couple of decades after independence and so on. उसके बाद बहुत strict हो गया था. You saw Todas of Nilgiris, you guys remember? They were basically cattle herders. Cattle as in like मतलब आपके buffaloes. Their entire economy basically revolves around the buffaloes. Then you have Bhotias, you have Gaddis, you have Bakarwals. These are all the groups that we have seen so far. Pastoralist, animal rearing करते हैं. If you remember the Asurs वो क्या करते हैं? If you can see this here, ठीक है? Asurs में अगर आप देखोगे, they're making this, वो traditional kind of like iron smelting. Asurs है, Agarias है, they are essentially these famous iron smelters. ठीक है? मतलब cutting edge. Scientists hai. So you can see this, right? This is like scientist kind of work. In today's time period, it looks kind of, not so great, but, and these are the scientists of, a century ago, 2 centuries ago, and so on. Okay? And for millennia, they were. Today, many of these kind of occupations, they have completely disappeared. It's very difficult to do these things and survive. Modern world ho chuka hai. Modern industries hai. They're basically producing very cheap iron products. In comparison to theirs. Okay, and आपको भी पता है कि आप कहाँ पे जाके खरीद रहे हो. Okay, have you, your mom, everybody else, have they actually gone and bought आपका डोसा का वो वाला this thing from here? ठीक है? या कढ़ाई जो आप कहते हो कि did you buy it from here or did you basically buy it from a nice, big shop? Okay, and things like this. It's nice, it's shiny, it is nice and round, and वो सब, you understand thing, right? Okay, the clothes that you're wearing. Okay, do you think it is coming from the wool that is coming from here? ठीक है, summer है, but you get the picture, right? So understand this. It's not a very easy way to make it. So traditional tribal occupations are losing out. ठीक है, they're losing their markets and so on. Okay, and this is the skill that you have had for generations. You're the best at it. Okay, but you cannot be the best at it in comparison to industry, to the factory. You can't compete with machines. Okay, you realize so nobody wants your skill. Okay, all the students studying anthropology are still going to the local shop and buying the industry made kind of iron tools and equipment and khadai and things like this. Same thing goes for somebody else, who's making wool and things like this. Unemployment increase ho raha hai. The problem again is not that they're not doing work. They are doing work. It is not the laziness. Okay, it is definitely not this. The problem is an economic transition that they are actually not prepared for. Okay, and nobody is preparing them for it. Okay, they're forced into it. If you look at the statistics of unemployment, and there are some numbers, and these are highly kya kahein, theek hai? See, numbers will generally make your argument stronger. But we also know that there is a lot of undercounting in these kind of things. Conservative estimates hai, मान लो. NSSO का report hai. Under scheduled tribe, men जो है, they experienced unemployment, and that unemployment is basically rising. It is only increasing. So it is increasing from 2.9% to 3.4%. It's these numbers here, but you have to show these kind of things. But it's an undercounting. You will say कि अच्छा कुछ काम कर रहे हो ना? How can they survive without not doing any kind of work? Urban ST women जो है, they even suffered more. ठीक है, that is also it's going from your 3.4% all the way till your 4.8% or something. ठीक है, you get the picture, right? Direction is more important than the absolute numbers here or the percentage here. Even rural areas में अगर आप देखोगे, there is deterioration तो हो रहा है. Rural tribal men जो है, they that unemployment is increasing. ठीक है, and numbers might look small. ठीक है, but you have to understand an important point. Most tribal families जो है, they already survive just about poverty max. ठीक है, even a small increase here essentially matters to a great extent. One employed family member जो है, that's it. The household abhi, if like एक member extra has become unemployed because of let's say the person is not healthy today, ठीक है, that entire household is going to suffer because everybody put together they are barely surviving. You understand na? Children go, they have to leave schools. If one person falls ill, ठीक है, and they're not able to work, the child cannot go to school. Nutrition ka quality is going to decline. ठीक है, debt will increase rapidly. One problem can create many others, right? So that is a whole cycle that we've been seeing. So there's an important question here. Why does this unemployment actually happen? If we look at the reasons, what could be the reasons for unemployment and underemployment? अगर आप देखोगे, ठीक है, what is the issue here? The first thing is they are extremely knowledgeable for a different kind of a world, the forest ka world. Okay, but they are not living in that forest. We have said ki you don't have access to the forest. You know, the forest department has access to that particular forest. So outside world ke liye, there is poor education. Many villages, if you see, they still don't have the kind of schools set. Quality schools kuch hote nahi hai. And many of the kids, agar wo tribal areas mein hain, they essentially, you can take a look at ki kaise honge this thing. And this kid who's basically here, imagine this, theek hai, he must have walked 10 kilometers through, jungles and difficult places and wild animals and things like this just to get here. It will take him at least 2-3 hours. ठीक है, वापस जाने के लिए again you have to do this. And उसके लिए खाना चाहिए. ठीक है, to have that, you'll not get. So many children eventually stop studying. It's just a matter of time before we drop out. So without that education, what happens? Better jobs will remain impossible. कैसे मिलेंगे? ठीक है. Second thing is also with regard to infrastructure. If you look at the poor infrastructure, meaning the basic facilities जो होने चाहिए, there should be a road. ठीक है, that connects to this. It will be missing. ठीक है, forget internet and all. Internet तो नहीं होगा, ठीक है, but industries नहीं आएंगे, private companies they'll never come to these kind of places. You get the picture, right? So if you are a person who's manufacturing these beautiful bamboo baskets that we talked about in yesterday's class, and there is no proper road, whom are you going to sell this to? Okay, that is that. And then you also need skill training, okay, education, and then not everybody is going to go back to 10 years of schooling, 15 years of schooling. If any basic skill that can be marketable. Many tribal youth jo hai, okay, they don't possess the kind of talent that is required, or I should not put it that way. They have immense talent, but can I say ki the kind of talent that is required, or there's no talent. Okay, talent ka is like innate abilities. They have 100%. Okay, but the kind of skills that you require, okay, some kind of technical training, all those kind of things never ever reach them. Most of them cannot even, वो computer skills नहीं होंगे, right? But what if we can give them electrician का training या machine operation आप करिए, ठीक है, modern agriculture, and things. But ये सब नहीं पहुंचते हैं वहाँ पे. So without any of these things, they have to remain trapped in these low-paying construction labor या agri labor या industrial labor and so on. ठीक है? The problem is not the talent. That's my point here. It is not their ability. It is a lack of opportunity. Systemic है ये. ठीक है, अभी नहीं होगा, 10 साल के बाद नहीं हो रहा है. It doesn't seem like the thing is changing. Great policies, poor implementation. ठीक है. Another thing is also discrimination. There is an unfair treatment. Many employers basically still carry these kind of stereotypes. ठीक है, they assume that the tribal workers जो है वो क्या करेंगे, यहाँ पे कुछ होगा नहीं, less capable है, ऐसे सब these kind of thoughts will be there outsiders में. ठीक है, and as a result वो आदिवासी है, ठीक है, why should I basically give him equal money as somebody else, ऐसे thoughts भी हैं. So they don't ever receive proper payment equivalent to others. ठीक है, कुछ interviews नहीं मिलेंगे, ठीक है, they will be completely frustrated. ठीक है, another important reason, again you can go back, land alienation is always an important issue. Okay, is that right? ठीक है, so many tribes, if you see, they have always been some kind of agricultural community or something, ठीक है, millets and other kind of things. Land was their identity, but developmental projects or large dams, mining projects, industries, protected forests, all of those things, when they came, they changed everything. Entire villages basically shifted elsewhere. Imagine you are a fisherman, and you're asking that particular fisherman to suddenly become a software engineer, bano na, and then make something and then buy a home. ठीक है, how long will it take for them to adjust? ठीक है, and if you are in that cycle में stuck हो, it takes we are not able to see if we can come out of this particular cycle. So a farmer who's losing land cannot suddenly become, let's say, an office worker. ठीक है, that person can only sell his manual labor. ठीक है, not because he prefers to do that. ठीक है, but because there is no other alternative available to that particular person. And that explains why this kind of a land loss eventually becomes the main reason for their unemployment and underemployment. Large scale displacement. Displacement also creates livelihood loss. Okay, again, if you see, current affairs वगैरह आप देखोगे, right? You have scholars like, Richard Mahapatra who basically make this powerful observation. Not just him, like so many. He says tribes जो है, they're actually quitting farming rapidly. The kind of farming that they used to do. Every other tribal जो है, meaning like 50% of the tribals जो है, उनके households जो है, they actually survive through manual labor today. And mostly manual laborers किस kind of economy होते हैं? It is informal economy. Unorganized sector होते हैं, informal sector होते हैं. So this means कि वो wages जो है unstable wages है. There is no job security, there is no pension, there is no insurance. Okay, none of those kind of things. If you see here, you can also see, these kind of articles, you can see Project Tiger is a great thing for tigers. Tiger conservation is extremely important. Nobody's going to dispute that. Neither you nor me, nobody. But conservation should never ignore the people who've been there. There is a report that basically comes saying that 5.5 lakh of tribals jo hai, they may face displacement. Can you imagine this? 5.5 lakh displacement because you notify some place as tiger reserve hai, you're expanding your tiger reserves and so on. Kahan jayenge? That is 5.5 other lakh households that are going to go into all the kind of problems that we've been speaking of. But this is happening today. We are not talking about, let's say, something in 1970s. ठीक है, we've already been saying कि मतलब वो displacement ये हो रहा है वो हो रहा है and things like this. ठीक है, earlier जो displacement we used to talk about, it's like 100 families or something. ठीक है, 5,000 people. ठीक है, per protected area. These are thousands. ठीक है, after 2021 अगर आप देखोगे, these newer reserves के जो average हैं, it is like the average number of people who are getting displaced, 48,000 people. Imagine 50,000 people are basically getting displaced. So, whether one agrees, whether it is 48,000 या 5,000 या whatever it is, right? उसको छोड़ो. The large ratio तो remain करता है, right? Development and conservation. यहाँ पे it cannot be, right? Whether it is development or whether it is conservation, it must include justice for the tribal communities. You cannot look at tigers and say कि मतलब not people. You cannot look at development and say कि not some people. ठीक है? Victims of progress and partners in progress. ठीक है, it cannot be two different groups. So protection of forest भी होना चाहिए. ठीक है, but unintentionally you don't destroy the forest dwellers because the forest dwellers are the protectors of the forest. They are the conservationists. So all these things are kind of happening. There is this conflict and human cost also. Extremists. Somebody basically said, is this a cause of your Naxalism or your left wing extremism? Okay, left wing extremism. Some days, some words just don't come. Okay, if you think about the state of Chhattisgarh, वहाँ पे there's a place called as Bastar. Anybody from Chhattisgarh, okay, finding it difficult to speak. Anybody from Chhattisgarh, please let me know. Okay, if you think about Bastar, Bastar is a place in Chhattisgarh. Okay, for decades, what has happened is that there has been a lot of violence that has continued there. Many human rights organizations, वगैरह वहाँ पे जाते हैं, they appeal for a ceasefire. Both sides should basically stop fighting. Stop करो. But why is this fighting happening? Because ordinary Adivasis जो है, they are the ones who've been इतना suffer कर चुके हैं. ठीक है, imagine that you're basically living in one of those kind of villages जहाँ पे the state जो है, the government जो है is suspecting कि मतलब are you a Maoist? ठीक है, the Maoists are basically coming and looking at you and saying कि मतलब are you a state sympathizer, the government का sympathizer? दोनों, anybody knocks on your door, you're angry. Sorry, you're scared. ठीक है, and both of them want your loyalty. ठीक है, but the villagers are like मतलब कि मतलब आप they just want peace. ठीक है, they just want, they're like normal people, they just want schools, they just want hospitals, they want roads, they want employment. Many frustrated tribal youth जो है because of all these kind of problems that you have seen today. I'm sure that many of you are also kind of very frustrated today after all of these kind of issues. ठीक है, but बंदूक में आंसर नहीं है. Okay, you have to understand this. And but you understand, you're frustrated because you can't find any decent kind of work. ठीक है, sometimes they get attracted, especially the young. Okay, to these extremist organizations who say कि मतलब you have done all this development, you have basically done everything peacefully. कुछ मिला नहीं मिला. ठीक है, ये है आपका बंदूक. ठीक है, you have to understand, violence becomes attractive to them. Okay, not exactly attractive, not because the violence is even attractive. ठीक है, but because hopelessness has been around for so many decades, it has become so dangerous. ठीक है, that is why employment is not merely an economic kind of an issue. It is also a question of bringing peace, to bring justice, to bring human dignity back to the tribes. Is this clear? And we will see those kind of issues, a little later as well. Take a left-wing extremism in great detail, and you see this, right? So for example, in this, you'll see this. Imagine your family basically owned farmland, and for many generations, that land gave you your food, your income, your identity, your culture, your religious, all those things, right? And imagine that you're losing this land. What happens next? Okay? You cannot suddenly become, from a forest ka person into suddenly a banker or a baker or an engineer or a doctor, take a government officer, right? Aapke paas reservation hai na? They are nowhere close to being able to take any of these kind of benefits. Okay? What do most of the families do? They are going to become manual laborers. ठीक है, you give them a certificate, doesn't matter, ठीक है, it's going to take them many generations, and if you're caught in that particular cycle, coming out seems extremely difficult, right? Like the Mahabharata ka story, once you enter, you need to know how to exit. Okay, nobody knows how to exit, right? So scholars basically say that tribal communities, they're basically quitting farming quite rapidly, and every other household, every second household, every 50% of them have now become from their own farms and their own kind of land में agriculture करना to becoming manual laborers, and that too in your informal sector. Uncertain wages, no written contracts, कुछ pension नहीं, कुछ medical insurance नहीं, कुछ no guaranteed kind of employment, ठीक है, completely literally dependent on somebody else. Tough. It is not very easy. In fact, you have MGNREGA, and you also have for example, here, before we go to MGNREGA has changed, by the way. Okay, in fact, if you can see between 2001 and 2011 ka census, if you see, the number of tribal cultivators, they declined by, nearly 10%. At the same time, the number of agricultural laborers, so meaning apne land mein hame karna, okay, that has decreased by 10%. And what happened to that 10%? Out of that, 9% of them have become agricultural laborers. Ek 1% something else. Okay, they might have been industrial labor or something. So earlier they cultivated their own sort of land. Now they work for somebody else's land, that somebody must have taken that particular land, or they must have. This is also called as proletarianization. Okay, proletarianization. Okay, becoming from cultivator to becoming wage workers. This is one of the biggest economic changes that are taking place amongst the tribal societies. We don't even get to know, because this is going to create a lot of impact on the news. Put up something that can create more TRPs. How many times did you read about any of these tribes? Okay, but the worst socioeconomic indicators actually belong here. See, MGNREGA, and now to aapko pata hai, it has been rechristened with another name, VBG Ramji. Okay, that is the name of it. Okay, so if you see, MGNREGA was a safety net. Okay, and that's the next question, right? So can the government help? Can you do something? ठीक है, इतना बुरा situation है. So MGNREGA or your VBG Ramji, ठीक है. The purpose is basically simple: guarantee some rural families at least 100 days of daily wage ka employment, 100 days ka, or 125 in the recent one and so on. Why is this kind of important? Because tribal families के लिए that is very important. ठीक है, they need immediate kind of income, right? Even before you can actually bring them that long-term development, it takes time. ठीक है, but उसके अभी के लिए क्या करें? So the government officials estimated that, mostly if you see, SCs and STs together are the biggest chunk of the people who use MGNREGA and VBG Ramji. Around 40%. And again, up and down would jata hai, and so on. Okay? VBG Ramji or MGNREGA. Remember this carefully. Their share in the population, both put together, is only approximately, let's say, 22%. Okay? But the number of people who are actually participating, unka participation rate is basically double of it. Much higher. So what does it tell you? Tribal communities depend on this thing heavily. If MGNREGA में हाथ रखोगे या VBG Ramji में हाथ रखेंगे, ठीक है, who does it hurt the most? SCs, STs, the poorest. ठीक है, many STs, right? So during these agricultural off seasons, कुछ अगर नहीं मिलेगा, ठीक है, MGNREGA, VBG Ramji basically act as that safety net, temporary sort of protection, because they don't have for tomorrow. ठीक है, एक दिन ये नहीं है, बच्चे भूखे रहेंगे. ठीक है, of course. This cannot be a permanent solution. Nobody can say कि MGNREGA, the government में dependent रहो, is the final solution. But this is just a support before we can really bring in some long-term development. Okay, but of course, even within the MGNREGA, there are so many of these kind of challenges as well. What are the kind of challenges when it comes to MGNREGA, VBG Ramji? Okay, and the name is just getting changed. Okay, but we don't have any studies for VBG Ramji, wala this thing. So MGNREGA is what you're going to quote. Initially, if you see, STs participated enthusiastically in this MGNREGA because it was required. In the first year, the participation was somewhere around 36%, I believe. Okay, let's take a look at the number. Let me just confirm. Okay, if you can see this thing here, it is 36%. And by the time you come to this particular point, right, your enthusiasm is basically declining. It is eventually touching 16 to 17%. In some years, it has gone down to 16 to 17%. Why is this basically happening? Several reasons are being suggested. Work availability नहीं आ रहा है. You're supposed to have it, it's guaranteed, but वो नहीं आ रहा है. You're saying tribals के लिए it is not just कि I will make that money and when I get it I'll do it. उनका daily का requirement, immediate requirement है. ये delayed wage payment होते हैं. It does not happen immediately. ठीक है, many people have also resorted because of these kind of problems in these kind of schemes. They have started migrating. कहीं और जाएंगे, वो contractor लेके जाएगा, 50 रुपए देगा, 100 रुपए देगा, but देगा. ठीक है, they have gone to some other kind of villages, and work opportunities कुछ नहीं मिलेंगे, but कुछ मिलेगा तो we'll take it rather than something like this. there's another concern as well, and this has been pointed out by this AARM, okay, which is Adivasi Adhikar, Rashtriya Manch. Okay, and what they essentially say is that the tribal communities may, from nearly 20% of all the MGNREGA workers, okay, what has happened? So meaning, I'll just repeat this, right? So meaning 20% of your tribal communities are actually dependent on this MGNREGA, VBG, RAMG and so on, okay? So if there is a budget ka allocation may even a small little hit, okay, it is going to disproportionately impact the tribal workers. So the suffering is going to be disproportionately higher on the tribals. So वहाँ पे हाथ मत रखिए, उसको cut मत कीजिए, ठीक है? Because they depend on it most heavily, right? So this particular program is very important to them, right? It's always, strength and limitations and so on. But of course, MGNREGA में बहुत सारा ये corruption भी होता है, ठीक है? उसको हमें कम करना है. The money should basically reach finally the persons who are really, deserving of it, ठीक है? आदिवासी अधिकार, राष्ट्रीय मंच, and so on. Okay. Now, what could be done and what is being done? See, there is a positive case study as well. Things, on a hopeful note, we'll have maybe a little bit of a smile. Not every story has to end sadly. In 2018, and sadly not much has happened since then, India's first tribal employment exchange had started functioning, and it was in Kerala, in a place called as Thiruvananthapuram, which is the capital city. उनका एक objective ऐसा था कि let's connect the tribal youth with whatever kind of employment opportunities are coming up, okay? So we'll provide them with some career guidance and offer some skill development, and and many of them are kind of like just to be interviewed or to speak to somebody else, उनमें confidence नहीं रहता है. Let's improve their interview का confidence and so on, okay? We'll do whatever it takes to kind of like improve their employability and so on, okay? Imagine that there is an educated tribal graduate, okay, and he's living in a remote tribal village and so on. Earlier nobody informed him कि ये vacancy है, training program है, interview है and so on. Now, some center has basically opened up. It can actually be a bridge if you have more of these. So information gap jo hai, it is being kind of like, we are trying to solve that. It can bridge that information gap. So this is a good example of, how we can have inclusive development, right? So growth hai, but everybody can grow together. And we need more of these kind of centers, okay? And many more of these kind of examples, right? Across India, because opportunity should never depend on, ki what is your birth ka identity. Okay? Because you're a tribe, you don't get those opportunities. That's ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए, right? Anybody and everybody should have access to growth. Okay, a lot of people also say कि reservation तो है. What is the problem here? See, even if reservations exist, okay, why does unemployment continue? Reservation creates opportunity. It cannot automatically create qualified candidates very soon. It cannot automatically fill candidates fill openings, vacancies. There was a recent Parliamentary Standing Committee का एक report था. It highlighted this. Large numbers of reserved posts जो है for the scheduled tribes, they still remain vacant. Not because reservation system as a whole failed. Reservation में there are some tribes who are doing really, really well. They're all basically sort of getting. And उनमें भी population ऐसा नहीं है कि they can take. There is, recruitment itself में there is delays. Many departments simply do not fill up these kind of posts. In fact, there was a study that was basically showed that Syed Zegam Murtaza, strongly criticized that you cannot have these kind of delays or these kind of vacancies. That's not a good thing, right? Why this? Why such vacancies? Reflect karo. There is administrative apathy. This means there is a lack of seriousness on the part of administration, on the executive, in implementing a constitutional right called as a reservation. We don't have adequate number of people who are qualified. Then why are they not qualified yet? Okay, so reservation in the constitution or reservation on paper, okay, cannot be very different from the reservation actual practice. That's what we say, letter and in spirit. So these are not always identical. जो है और जो actually in reservation जो है in your constitution, in papers, in your this thing, and reservation in practice, they're not always the same. They're not always identical. So that is why we say कि implementation जो है, it matters so much, okay, as much as policy. In fact, implementation is more important than policy itself. So reservation alone cannot resolve. There are systemic problems that need to be resolved. Okay, let's take a look at the quiz questions. Asura Nagaria tribes were traditionally known as what? ठीक है, आपके iron smelters, like cutting edge technologists, they were technocrats of that word. According to Richard Mahapatra, many tribal families now depend on what is it? IT sector, tourism, government jobs, manual labor है. ठीक है, very simple. Which region did we talk about that conflict kind of region, जहाँ पे a lot of them have वहाँ पे left-wing extremism is very very prominent. It is your Bastar का region. Which program acts as an employment safety net for rural tribal families? It is your MGNREG. ठीक है, fairly easy. Okay, I've kept it just so that I can. This is like a summary of what I'm trying to say. Is this clear? So there's an overlap in classes. See, how do I deal with this? See, overlap के लिए I'll tell you. I'm not saying this because anthropology is my subject. ठीक है, optional जो है it is a master's level paper. बाकी सब आपका जो है वो GS का पेपर है, ठीक है, which is your school level kind of paper. इसको मास्टर करना उतना आसान नहीं है. Although many of our students say कि मतलब anthro I'm doing well sir, I feel comfortable, I feel not so this thing, but GS में what should I be doing, ऐसे questions पूछते हैं. Give it time. But I will say कि optional जो है you try as much as possible only to attend it live. Except I saw one more message कि somebody said कि मतलब मुझे वो handout चाहिए and things like this. ठीक है, handouts are going to be given only after class. Now if you feel कि मतलब handouts चाहिए and हम अलग से मेरे हिसाब से मैं करूँगी, then I'll tell you one thing as a solution. ठीक है, you watch it later. ठीक है, I think the handouts have already been sent and I think by the time it is done and given to you, format and important 3-4 दिन तो लगते हैं. ठीक है, so let's say by Monday. So from Monday you can start watching it once you get the handouts वाला thing. For the rest of you, please ये वाला method follow मत करो because you want to do it in the quickest kind of manner. When is the only time you should read your handout? ठीक है, only after the assignment is given and on that day when you're going to write this particular question because every part of the syllabus I'm going to give you an assignment. ठीक है, अभी करोगे वहाँ पे also if you're writing on let's say in the next week, you're not going to remember anything. एक और बार करोगे, then you say कि मतलब how come others are actually submitting all of these things early and मेरा कभी चल नहीं रहा है. ठीक है, it is because somebody is doing it more efficient, somebody is basically doing it by following what I generally say. ठीक है, because it matters यार. ठीक है, मतलब UPSC के लिए कितना भी टाइम दोगे वो कम ही रहेगा. ठीक है, so do it in a manner जहाँ पे I tell you and I am very picky about कि कितना कर पाओगे. I understand human limitations. ठीक है, not all of you are going to be machines जहाँ पे पूरा I'm never going to say कि मतलब 16 hours के लिए पढ़ो. Although मतलब the number of hours that I teach is 10.5 hours. ठीक है, I do say कि hard work is important, but you're not going to मतलब 16 hours में क्या जाएगा. ठीक है, so what is important today? Finish off the lectures. Okay, that is more important. Watching of those lectures. I'll tell you कि मतलब करना क्या है, कब करना है, in a very realistic and possible kind of manner. And I also understand कि not everybody has all the kind of time in the world कि मतलब हम ये भी करेंगे, वो भी करेंगे, वो भी करेंगे, ये भी करेंगे. It doesn't happen. So I say कि मतलब you give me the month का plan. I will tell you realistic है कि नहीं है. ठीक है, right priority है कि नहीं है. Okay, and anthro के लिए अगर any question है, please don't go to some other kind of mentor. You don't have any mentor. ठीक है, somebody who emailed me saying कि but my mentor said something. ठीक है, I don't know who's that mentor. ठीक है, anthro के लिए there is no mentor. ठीक है, I am the only mentor. I am your guide. I am your teacher. I am your faculty. I am your evaluator. I am your everything here. ठीक है, so if somebody says something, ठीक है, the approach is different. Okay, you asked n number of people कितने opinions मिलेंगे, कितने advice मिलेंगे, n+1. ठीक है, you cannot follow. ठीक है, just follow as I say. Okay, and you will basically be able to make it in the quickest possible manner. And ऐसा होगा कि मतलब आपका एक confidence in this particular subject will be मतलब stellar. ठीक है, of course ये थोड़ा सा याद रखना है, ये वो वाला करना है and things like this. ठीक है, and when somebody says कि sir I have not completed my assignment because I read open book and I read closed book and I tried to memorize it but here are 10 questions. ठीक है, ये जो student I basically showed you is going to get far ahead. ठीक है, is going to get that comfort with that particular subject much more. Because अभी का goal is basically what? Write one answer if possible on every single topic and there is a whole phase जहाँ पे आपको memorization के लिए. Okay, as soon as you finish your foundation you move to the QEP plus where I push you. I put you in that thing. यहाँ पे you're going to write this and you're going to write more than this. But there you're going to focus on writing from here. क्या था, वो क्या था, उसके बाद ये है, उसके बाद ये है, वो कौन है, वो ये है. That is a particular phase because you've already completed your syllabus. You have that skeletal ideas of everything. Not memory. Memory is the last thing. Memory is the easiest thing. ठीक है, गधा मजदूरी करना है. ठीक है, यहाँ पे अंडरस्टैंडिंग करना है. अंडरस्टैंडिंग इज हार्डर देन मेमोराइजेशन. You understand, huh? There are different phases for this thing. So always, when I'm telling you, मतलब do it exactly how I say. Don't do even 1% more than what I say. ठीक है, I will get you. Okay, it is my responsibility. अभी भी some foundation के students have actually cleared prelims. I wish there were more students who had cleared. But we have these students. देखो कि वो कैसे कर रहे हैं. पहले मेंस में वो कैसे कर रहे हैं, अब देखो. Okay, and so on. ठीक है, we have 2 more problems. If there is that overlap, my sincere suggestion is, watch this one live and watch the others later. Okay, you don't understand. Okay, school level ke papers, and then there is one optional ka paper, and the mains is going to be decided by what? Your selection is going to be decided not by prelims. Prelims is just an entry. Okay, it is by mains. Mains ka first 5 papers are ki you just should not have a bad paper. The selection essentially happens because of your optional. Who is in Labasna every single year? It is the persons who are the toppers in every option. Of course, एक optional में एक topper होगा, एक optional से hundreds of people might go, या tens of people might go. You get the picture, right? ठीक है, so you've got to be the best in your option. It is the optional that decides everything. Your selection depends on when can you be your expert in your optional, and that year you have to clear your prelims. Understood? ठीक है, so please do not take optional lightly. Okay, optional is the main deal. Optional is basically selection, everything comes down to your optional. Please go ahead and whatever you have written for your Indian society wala thing, go ahead and submit. That's it. Have a great afternoon. Be productive. I'll see you later. Bye.